Arrival. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // The Dragon Pit. The midday sun bore down on the ancient ruins of the Dragon Pit, its broken dome casting jagged shadows across cracked stone and time-worn dragon bones. The banners of House Lannister and Baratheon snapped sharply in the warm wind, red and gold, and the crowned stag flaring like fire. Cersei Lannister sat, flanked by lords of the Crownlands and the ever-silent Kingsguard, each armored in white and still as marble. Her gown of crimson shimmered slightly in the light, though her expression was carved from ice. Near her, Petyr Baelish stood with his hands folded in front of him, ever the portrait of calm, though his eyes flicked constantly toward the horizon. Cersei leaned slightly toward him, her voice low and laced with contempt. Are you certain he's coming, Lord Baelish? Or did this pretender disappear into smoke? Petyr offered a pleasant smile, the kind that said he expected the question. The raven from Riverrun was not a fake letter, Your Grace. There were witnesses who saw the black beast take to the skies, him and the Dragon Queen riding together. She scoffed softly, her eyes scanning the shattered ceiling of the pit. Then he could have flown anywhere. Dorne. The Vale. Across the narrow sea. Baelish tilted his head, a faint smirk playing on his lips. I don't think men like him bother with riddles when they think they hold all the pieces. If he wanted to disappear, he'd never have to tell us anything. Cersei's fingers tapped once against her goblet. And what sort of man walks into the Red Keep knowing that every dagger might be pointed at his back? One who's never known fear, Petyr murmured. Or worse, one who's stopped caring. But that would be his final mistake. That answer settled over her like a gust of cold air. She glanced to Qyburn behind her, then toward the gathering of nobles seated along the pit's edge restless, whispering, all of them watching the skies. Cersei remained still, her gaze fixed on the broken arches. Her voice, when it came, was as cold as winter steel. Let him come. She raised her cup to her lips but did not drink. I want to see this monster with my own eyes. The sky stretched wide and golden above them, the wind howling past as Drogon and the cannibal soared side by side over the green and sun-washed hills. Below, the Riverlands had given way to the Crownlands' rolling fields, small hamlets, the glint of armor from patrols that scattered like ants at the dragon's shadow. Ahead, rising like a scarlet jewel above the land, was King's Landing. Aeron narrowed his eyes as the sprawling city came into view. The outer walls, the densely packed slums, the towering sept, and high above it all, the Red Keep, perched like a crown of the city. The capital, he said quietly, voice laced with admiration. Daenerys turned her head slightly, the wind tossing her silver hair like a banner behind her. Her gaze swept over the city, and her grip on Drogon tightened. My family's legacy, she said. Her voice trembled, but only faintly. Aeron's gaze rested on the Red Keep. Impressive structure, he said. To see it like this. Dany gave him a sideways look. Your first time here in King's Landing? Not exactly, he replied, a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. I once visited the dungeon beneath the Red Keep, the one with the dragon skulls. Daenerys arched a brow. You need to be inside the keep to reach the skulls, she said. And to get into the keep, you have to enter the city. Aeron didn't look at her. Well, I didn't, I teleported there. A pause. Then Daenerys let out a breath and shook her head, lips twitching. Right, sometimes I forget you're not just an ordinary man. He glanced at her, curious. Does that bother you? No, she said, her voice softening. It does not. A silence stretched between them as the dragons glided lower, the Red Keep looming closer now. It's my first time here too, Daenerys admitted quietly. I was born in Dragonstone. My family fled before I could ever set foot inside these walls. I used to dream about them, the throne room, the gardens, the bells. Her voice held no bitterness, but there was weight behind it, years of exile, loss, and whispers of a throne she'd never seen. She looked down at the city. Aeron turned toward her. And do you still dream of it? She hesitated. No, I stopped dreaming of the throne the day my dragons were born. Since then, I've only believed in it. And that I would take back everything they took from us. Aeron looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Good, he said. You'll need that fire in you moving forward. Kingslanding. The sun hung high in the sky above King's Landing, warm and golden. Merchants cried their wares in the bustling market, the scent of roasted meat and river fish thick in the air. Children ran barefoot through puddles. Bakers cursed the heat in their ovens. Life, despite its hardship, moved on. And then the sun disappeared. At first, people glanced upward, shielding their eyes. A cloud, they thought. Summer storms came often enough. But then came the sound deep and unnatural. A low, distant thunder not from the sky, but from something alive. A sound that stirred the instincts of man and beast alike. The crowd stilled. Then someone screamed. Two massive shapes pierced the sky, wings beating, and the first was massive and terrible, black as the void, spined and scarred and shadow-like, eyes like molten fury. The cannibal. The second, much smaller yet still just as monstrous, let out a deafening roar that echoed off the stones and sent birds scattering into the sky. Drogon. People ran. Not just away, everywhere. Children were yanked off the ground. Vendors abandoned their carts. One man dropped his gold and didn't even look back. Chickens flapped wildly, dogs barked and bolted. The bells of the sept rang from the shockwave of cannibals' cry, mistaken for alarm. Mothers screamed for their sons, and guards yelled orders they didn't believe would help. A woman knelt in the street, whispering prayers to the seven through sobs. A boy no older than 7 stared at the sky, frozen in terror as the cannibal passed overhead, and for a heartbeat, the world went black. His eyes reflected only wings. They're back, someone whispered in awe. The stories about the dragons, the Targaryens, they're back. No, another croaked, gripping a broken cart. That one, that's not natural. That's not a dragon. That's a demon. From the rooftops, a gold cloak took one look, dropped his spear, and fled. Above it all, the two dragons soared together, gliding toward the ancient Colosseum of the Dragon Pit. In the upper districts, lords and ladies stared from their balconies in horror. Some dropped goblets. Some dropped to their knees. A few dared to clutch at their walls as if that would hold back the sky itself. And in the Red Keep, soldiers fumbled with their swords. The Dragon Pit. The seats of the High Council were arranged in a semicircle beneath the ruined dome of the Dragon Pit, open to the sky, scorched and battered by time. Cersei Lannister sat at the center, golden lions embroidered on her crimson gown, eyes fixed on the horizon. Beside her, Baelish seated calmly, fingers steepled. Around them, lords, knights, and Kingsguard murmured among themselves, anxious and uncertain. Then came the sound. Low at first. Distant. A rumble that trembled in the stone beneath their boots. The bell of the Great Sept tolled once in alarm from the city behind them, deep in foreboding. A warning from the faith. A sound meant for kings and commoners alike. Cersei's head snapped up. A shadow fell across the Dragon Pit. Every soul within looked up and froze. Descending from the sky like judgment itself, 2 dragons emerged from the sun's glare. A creature black as void, vast beyond belief. Its wings cast a darkness that swallowed the light. When it roared, the very air quivered, and dust rained down from the broken dome. The cannibal. Cersei stood without realizing it, her goblet falling from her hand and shattering on the stone. Her breath caught. My gods, she whispered. That's. Beside her, Baelish's smug calm flickered for the first time. He took a cautious step forward, jaw tightening. Yes, he murmured. Whatever we heard was an understatement. The Kingsguard instinctively moved in front of the queen, blades half drawn, though all knew their steel would mean nothing if the creature chose to devour them all. Cersei watched as the dragons began to descend toward the dragon pit floor, her hands clenched at her sides. Her face was pale, but her fury simmered beneath it. The fear was there, yes, creeping like frost over her skin. But pride would not let her flinch. She squared her shoulders, voice low as steel. So the sorcerer comes, and brings his monster to strike fear in us. Baelish, lips thin, leaned toward her. You asked if he would come, he said. Well, here he is. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL 14 comments 0 vote. Dragon Pit Scheme. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // Drogon descended first, his wings stretched wide. He spiraled down with terrifying grace, his roar splitting the air like thunder. The dragon pit shook beneath his landing, the ancient stone groaning as claws the size of scythes struck the ground. The assembled lords flinched. Some gasped. A few staggered backward, hands resting uneasily on hilts, as if a sword could save them. Cersei's eyes narrowed. Drogon let out another earth-rattling roar, smoke curling from his maw as he glared across the pit, daring anyone to move. He spread his wings once more vast, before folding them in slowly. Then silence, for a moment. Until the cannibal arrived. A scream rang out from a lesser lord in the rear row. The sun vanished. The cannibal's wings were impossibly large, his shadow engulfed the entire dragon pit. His black form seemed to drink in the light, turning the world cold as he descended like some monstrous god from a forgotten age. And when he landed, the ground cracked. Stone broke beneath his weight. Dust exploded around his form as he let out a deafening, primeval roar. It was not like Drogon's, no, this was older. Deeper. The cry of a beast that had fed on its own kind, that had seen everything burn and survived. Men stumbled. A knight dropped his sword. One of the king's guard took a step back before regaining his composure. Mother have mercy, someone whispered. He's not going to kill us, is he? Muttered a lord from the Westerlands, his face ghost white. Baelish did not speak. For the first time in years, his mask of smug detachment cracked. His breath caught in his throat as he stared up at the cannibal, and for just a heartbeat, Petter Baelish felt small. From Drogon, Daenerys dismounted. Graceful, regal, her silver hair whipped in the wind as she descended, her cloak trailing behind. She did not look around. She carried herself with the grace of a queen. And behind her, Aeron dismounted from the cannibal. He did not leap, he stepped, as though descending from a throne. The cannibal gave a low rumble, but did not move. His glowing eyes watched, silent and still, like a god restraining his wrath. Aeron walked behind Daenerys, his black cloak rippling with the wind and shadow. His steps were quiet and measured. His eyes, those unnatural, glowing purple eyes, watched everything. And then they stopped. 10 paces from the gathered nobility of the realm, Daenerys stood at the front, her chin high, her gaze imperial. Aeron stood just next to her, his presence as cold as hers was fire. The silence that followed was suffocating. Cersei, to her credit, did not flinch. But her jaw clenched tight as she studied the man. The man with power dripping from his very presence. The man who walked with shadows like they were his guard. She turned to Baelish, voice low and sharp. You're certain he's not a Targaryen? Not some bastard of the Mad King? Baelish exhaled slowly, his voice hushed but firm. No, Your Grace. He's from Bear Island. We confirmed it. Lowborn. No trace of noble blood. Her eyes didn't leave Aeron. Then the gods have a cruel sense of humor. He certainly looked like one of them, she muttered. As the dust began to settle and the echoes of dragon roars faded into the winds, Baelish stepped forward, ever the spider creeping along the cracks of power. He gave a polished bow, his voice smooth as oiled silk. Lord Aeron, Queen Daenerys, the crown welcomes you to King's Landing, and to the dragon pit, though I admit, it may feel a touch too small for your companions. His eyes flicked to the cannibal, who had curled loosely in the ruins behind them like a great beast only pretending to sleep. Aeron nodded once, courteous but cool. It will suffice. He and Daenerys strode forward. The crowd of lords parted like wheat before a scythe. The silence of fear and awe followed them until they reached the row of seats prepared at the front. Aeron and Daenerys sat side by side, like a flame and a shadow given form. She carried herself with regal poise. He leaned back in his chair with a calm, unreadable expression, like a man who had all the time in the world and no fear of what it might bring. Aeron's eyes swept the half-circle of noblemen and courtiers, but they settled on Cersei Lannister. She was glaring. Beneath her composed face, there was fire and anger, coiled like a viper, but there was something else there too. Not quite fear. Colder. A flicker of unease, like she knew she was in the presence of something she could not predict or control. Aeron simply smiled at her. Slowly, Cersei looked away. He turned back to Baelish. Where is the king? Baelish, ever ready, gave a polite shrug. As you no doubt already know, His Grace is currently attending to other urgent matters. Aeron murmured. Then louder, to the gathered assembly. The boy king is too busy to receive those he calls his enemies. To forge peace is not an urgent matter. Curious. A breath of silence swept across the lords. Someone gasped. Another coughed behind a hand to cover it. Even a Kingsguard's armored gauntlet tensed on the pommel of his sword, but none moved. None dared. Baelish attempted a smile, but it came out strained. My lord, surely you understand, the king is. I didn't ask you to explain. Aeron cut him off, eyes flashing with subtle menace. My question was a test, Littlefinger. And you failed. Daenerys turned her head slightly, watching Aeron with interest, now curious at his shift in tone. I know your king is just a child, Aeron said quietly, but with venom behind every syllable. He has the crown, but the one who rules is not him. He turned then slowly, deliberately to Cersei. His eyes glowed faintly violet. No trick of the sun. Power shimmered behind them like a storm waiting to be unleashed. Where is Tywin Lannister? Aeron asked. It is he who was meant to receive us. Not you. Cersei's lips pressed into a tight line. But it was Baelish who answered. Yes. He said with his hands folded just so, Lord Tywin Lannister may serve as the king's hand, but he remains the warden of the West. The Rock calls to him still. He is a very busy man. Aeron looked at Baelish for a beat. Then he smiled. Fair enough. That smile made Cersei's eyes narrow. She glanced sidelong at Baelish. Baelish frowned ever so slightly, the first hint of a miscalculation flickering behind his eyes. Daenerys turned to Aeron, one brow raised. You accept that? He gave her a half glance. Yes, I see no issue here. Silver trays were brought forward, the clinking of goblets and the soft shuffle of servant feet filling the uneasy silence. A sweet, spiced wine from arbor stock, rich, red, and heavy in scent was poured for each of the gathered nobles. One servant, trembling, offered a cup to Queen Cersei first. She snatched it without a word, her fingers coiled tightly around the stem. The wine vanished down her throat in one long, slow draw. She set the cup down with a cold clink and lifted her hand without looking. More. The servant bowed and refilled her goblet. Baelish took his time sipping from his own. He turned slightly toward Aeron, voice soft but sharp enough to pierce the hum of tension. We can strike peace now, my lord, he said smoothly. What is your true purpose in Westeros? You wage a campaign of fire and shadows across the Stormlands, destructive and unprovoked. He swirled his cup with idle grace. There's no need for blood to go on spilling. The crown is prepared to reward obedience. You could be given lands, a title worthy of your talents. Daenerys Targaryen may take Dragonstone, as is her ancestral right. But the throne must remain in Baratheon hands. Across the stone bench, Aeron lifted his goblet but did not answer. He stared into the liquid as though reading the omens within it. Then, with the slow grace of a man unbothered by threats or offers, he drank. Baelish's eyes narrowed slightly. He dared not glance at Cersei. His entire focus rested on Aeron, trying and failing to read the man. A beat later, something unseen flickered before Aeron's eyes. Harmful substance detected. Detoxification in progress. Detoxification complete. He lowered the cup with a smile. Smooth and controlled. Daenerys, beside him, lifted her goblet next. Her fingers barely curled around it before Aeron's hand came up. He didn't shout. He didn't explain. With a flick of his wrist, invisible force whipped the cup from her hand, snatched and then lowered it in front of him. Daenerys was confused as to why he did that. Gasps echoed through the pit, from the display of his sorcery. Even Drogon stirred behind them, neck rising at the sudden shift. Baelish's expression froze. His hand clutched his goblet tighter as his lips parted, but no words came out. His gaze darted toward Cersei but only for the briefest moment, enough to betray what he feared Aeron might have already deduced. Aeron reached for Daenerys's drink. Without breaking eye contact with Baelish, he raised it to his lips and drank. Deliberately. When he lowered the cup again, his smile was still there but colder now. Cersei stared at him, her knuckles white around her own goblet. Baelish's silence had become a void, thick with unspoken dread. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL 13 comments 0 vote. Power play. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // Baelish offered his trademark smile, measured and smooth as silk, though there was a hint of tightness in his eyes now. Is it to your liking, Lord Aeron? He asked, voice as calm as still water. Aeron didn't answer. He slowly turned his head toward Baelish, his violet eyes narrowing. The air shifted. Without so much as raising his hand, an unseen force snapped forward. Baelish's throat clenched shut. He staggered where he stood, eyes bulging, hands clawing at his collar as if to pry away invisible fingers. A gasping, choking sound escaped his lips, barely a whisper of a breath. The entire dragon pit shifted. Lords and knights rose from their seats in alarm. Cersei shot up, stunned. Even the Kingsguard reached for their swords but hesitated when they saw the cannibal resting in the shadows like a coiled storm cloud, watching. Aeron's voice was quiet, but it cut through the space like drawn steel. Do you take me for a fool? He stood now, towering slightly over the choking Baelish, expression unreadable save for the faint amusement curled in the corner of his lips. That was a bold attempt, he said. Poison in a peace meeting. I almost admire the audacity. Baelish made a strangled noise, face turning red, then purple. His knees buckled slightly. Cersei took a step forward, her voice laced with fury and fear. Stop this at once. Daenerys turned her gaze to the Queen Regent, cold and unyielding. You try to poison us, she said, her voice sharp as a whip, and you dare to give orders. Cersei's jaw clenched. If we wanted you dead, you would be. Aeron's eyes never left Baelish. His grip, though unseen, tightened another notch. A vein popped along Baelish's temple. For a moment, it looked as though his windpipe would collapse. Then Aeron let go. Baelish crumpled to one knee, coughing violently, eyes watering, gasping like a man who had nearly drowned. No one moved to help him. Not even Cersei. Aeron turned back to his seat and sat, slow and composed, as if nothing had happened. He took another sip of the wine from Daenerys' goblet, then set it down on the table beside him. Try that again, he said softly, and I'll show you what fear truly means. The dragon pit was silent. Even the wind dared not speak. Aeron leaned back in his seat, resting one arm on the stone armrest as his glowing violet eyes turned toward the Queen Regent. As for you, Cersei, he said smoothly, voice low, I do have a gift. Cersei's brow furrowed in suspicion. Aeron raised his hand, fingers moving with a subtle, graceful command. Behind him, atop the cannibal's broad, mountainous back, a figure had been resting unseen amidst the shadows of the beast's spines. The cannibal let out a low, rumbling breath, as if irritated by the presence. The figure stirred limbs limp, face obscured by blood and dirt, then slowly began to hover, as if plucked by an unseen god. Gasps echoed through the pit as the figure drifted forward and gently descended to the ground like a puppet without strings. Approach, Aeron commanded, his voice carrying the weight of shadow and silence. The figure staggered forward, blood caked in golden curls, one eye bruised and swollen shut. His armor was cracked, torn, the lion sigil barely visible through the grime. Cersei's eyes widened, her breath hitched. For a moment, she looked as if she had seen a ghost. Jaime, she whispered. Then her voice rose into a half-scream as she ran toward him, the heels of her gown scraping against the stone. Jaime, she caught him before he fell, clutching his face with both hands. He was battered, barely standing, but when he saw her, a faint, familiar smirk curved his lips. You look awful, she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. Better than the last time I woke up in chains, this one was rather gentle. Jaime muttered hoarsely, wincing from the pain, but his bravado still intact. Cersei held him, trembling. Baelish, still on one knee and clutching his throat, looked between them with stunned disbelief. Aeron, watching from his seat, tilted his head and observed the reunion with something between disdain and pity. He spoke under his breath, only loud enough for Daenerys and perhaps the cannibal to hear. Disgusting. Daenerys glanced at him, curious, but said nothing. Aeron rose slowly, lifting his goblet once more as the tension in the dragon pit thickened like a hanging fog. He took a long sip of wine, his violet eyes resting on Baelish, whose throat still bore the red imprint of Aeron's invisible wrath. All around, nobles sat stiffly, uncertain whether to breathe or pray. You gave me offers, Aeron said, his voice calm, yet filled with a weight that quieted the murmurs of the pit. Now listen to mine, Littlefinger. The nickname cracked through the air like a whip, drawing the attention of everyone in attendance. He stepped forward with measured grace, setting his cup down with a metallic clink upon the edge of the old stone seat. His voice grew firmer. You are going to declare loyalty to the one true monarch of the Seven Kingdoms, and the Dragon Queen. Daenerys stood beside him now, still silent, her eyes locked on Baelish and Cersei. The latter held Jaime's arm tightly, but her lips were thin with fury. Aeron stepped away from the seats, turning his back on them, as if done, but then he stopped mid-step, slowly pivoting toward the gathering with a look of sovereign judgment. You have dishonored the Iron Throne long enough. His hand lifted, fingers curling and shadows twisted at his feet. A black flame roared into being beside him as Dricarizor materialized, forged from darkness and fire. The great sword's long edge burned with a subtle, flickering black flame, like a brand pulled from the deepest abyss. Gasps erupted from the nobles. Some stood, others clutched at their seats. Even the gold cloaks stiffened, hands uncertainly reaching for their hilts. Aeron's voice dropped into the tone of finality. Refuse this offer, and I will not halt my campaign. Once I receive word that the Stormlands are fully under my banner, the Crownlands will be next. One city at a time. One gate after the other. Until not even ash remains of your false kingdom. He gave them no time to respond. No time to beg or deny or scheme. He turned and strode toward the cannibal. Daenerys followed, silent beside him. But once they neared their dragons, she glanced at him, her expression unreadable. So much for peace talks, she said quietly, bitterness laced in her voice. Aeron stopped, boots grinding against the dragon pit's earth. He turned to face the lords once more. I could take this city right now, he said plainly, the words falling like hammers. I could watch the cannibal tear your red keep stone by stone. I could let my Shadow Legion descend like nightfall, but I am not a monster. He looked straight at Cersei. Unlike you Lannisters. She met his gaze furious, humiliated but said nothing. Drogon hissed behind them, lowering his neck. Daenerys climbed upon him, her silver braid catching the wind. Beside her, the cannibal shifted, its mountainous form casting half the dragon pit into shadow. Aeron climbed atop the beast's back. Once seated, he raised his voice for the final time. You have 3 days, he said, and now his tone was grave and cold like prophecy. 3 days to answer, or the Shadow Legion will fall upon your armies like a tide of night and silence, and there will be no dawn after it. The cannibal shrieked, a sound so deep and furious it made the stone beneath their feet tremble. Drogon responded with his own roar, defiant. Wings stretched wide, blotting out the sun once more. And then they leapt Cannibal and Drogon into the sky with a thunderous gust of wind that ripped through cloaks and scattered banners. The dragon pit quaked from their departure, leaving silence behind, and fear. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL 17 comments 0 vote. Storms Neil. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // The skies above King's Landing were vast and painted in gold, the sun beginning its descent behind the jagged mountains. High above, 2 great shadows cut across the sky. Drogon and the cannibal soared through the clouds, their wings beating with thunderous rhythm. Aeron sat astride the cannibal, the dark beast gliding with an eerie silence despite its massive form. Behind him, Daenerys rode Drogon, her silver hair trailing behind. She called out over the roar of the wind. You knew. Aeron turned his head slightly, hearing her even amidst the rush of air. You knew they would try something, she said. Aeron gave a nod. I expected it from the moment I saw Tywin Lannister's chair empty. Daenerys flew closer, Drogon drawing level with the cannibal. You saved my life, she said, her voice quieter now. I didn't thank you for that. Aeron's gaze remained fixed on the horizon. You are my queen after all. Had you drank that cup, they would have toasted to your death before you put down that cup. Dany's jaw tightened. I expected you to kill them. Aeron's response came low, deliberate. I wanted to, but not like that. She gave a humorless laugh. Because of what the public will say. Yes, Aeron said. Because the songs won't say. They defended themselves after they were about to be poisoned. They'll say, they slaughtered their hosts under truce. Daenerys frowned. Why should we care what they say? Let them choke on their songs. Aeron finally turned, standing tall upon the cannibal's back. His black cloak rippled like shadow in the wind. You do well to care what the people say of you, he said, his eyes fixed on her. If you mean to rule over them in peace. Dany was quiet. Aeron continued, it's true, we are strong. Stronger than any king or queen before us. We could burn every keep, silence every lord, bury every name that opposes us, but you'd be left ruling over ash and bone. Over silence. Over corpses, not men. The wind carried his words between them like an oath carved in smoke. She said nothing. Then, with a suddenness that startled even Drogon, Aeron leapt into the sky, his body soaring across the gap between the cannibal and Drogon. Daenerys's eyes widened as he landed with impossible precision on Drogon's back. He crouched low, stepping toward her, the wind tugging at his hair. He leaned in, close enough that only she could hear him. Don't worry about anything, he whispered. Then he kissed her. It was brief, soft, a moment of warmth amidst the cold sky. Before she could speak, he pulled back and said, return to Dragonstone. Daenerys blinked, surprised. And what about you? Aeron turned his head toward the Stormlands. I'll take care of business, he said. Grey Worm and Raya await me. The shadows have already whispered of our victory. Drogon gave a low growl, sensing Aeron's intent. The cannibal will fly with you all the way to the island, nothing can harm you. Daenerys narrowed her eyes. And you, how will you? But Aeron was already moving. He stepped to the edge of Drogon's back and then fell. Freefall. The air tore past him as he dropped like a spear hurled from the heavens. Daenerys reached instinctively, her heart clenching, but Aeron looked up and smiled mid-fall. Fear not, his voice echoed up to her. I don't need a flying beast to get where I want to go. And then he vanished into the clouds below like a shadow descending upon the realm. Daenerys remained still, the wind pulling at her cloak, her heart pounding. Behind her, the cannibal let out a long, thunderous shriek, and together, the dragons turned toward the narrow sea. The Stormlands, Night Song. The stone floor was still wet with blood. Aeron emerged from the shadows of the arched hallway, his boots echoing against the cold stone as he stepped into the ruined great hall of the keep. Torchlight flickered against soot-streaked walls, casting dancing silhouettes of armored figures, his shadow knights, grim and silent, their eyes burning faintly like coals in the dusk. Among them stood the Unsullied, disciplined and still, spears held upright like rows of iron trees. And at the center, leaning against the long table that had once seated lords, was Raya. Her leathers were dust-stained, her braid wild from battle. She turned the instant she saw him and let out a breath of relief, flashing a rare smile. "Aeron," she called. "You're here." He returned her smile with one of his own, faint but warm. His gaze swept across the hall bodies, both armored and noble, lay strewn in various corners. Some had died fighting. Others, clearly, had died kneeling too late. His voice came calm, casual. "Where are we, exactly?" Grey Worm stepped forward, armor still marked with blood. But before he could answer, Raya let out a sharp laugh. "Of course you don't know," she said, shaking her head. "You just appear out of nowhere and expect the world to announce itself to you." She stepped toward him, gesturing to the banners above, tattered but still bearing black nightingales on yellow. "We're in Nightsong, the last stronghold of the Stormlands." Aeron's expression shifted in realization. "Ah, that explains why my shadows notified me. You really took the entirety of the Stormlands, good job." He looked beyond the broken doors, past the charred courtyard and into the red dusk where hills met the horizon. "Beyond here, my king." Grey Worm finally spoke, his voice measured and grim. "Lies either the Reach, or Dorne, and we were ordered by the Queen to take the Stormlands only." "Did any of the lords here bend the knee peacefully?" Aeron asked without turning. "None," Grey Worm said, shaking his head. Everyone answered with steel. Aeron let out a low chuckle. "Too bad. And here I thought the Northerners were the stubborn ones." Raya grinned. "Seems the Stormlanders believe they were born in the storm and can withstand anything." Aeron stepped forward, his cloak billowing behind him like a living shadow. "I'm sure they will not think like that moving forward. They learned that there's a storm far stronger than theirs." He looked to the blackened remains of the high seat of House Karen. "A storm that will only grow stronger." Aeron stepped forward, running a hand across the splintered table before him. Shadows flickered along the cracked stone walls behind him, his knights unmoving, unbreathing, a silent testament to his dominion. His gaze shifted toward Raya once more. "Tell me," he said, voice low but expectant. "How did my shadow knights fare in battle?" Raya gave him a look that was half amusement, half awe. She exhaled, pulling off her gloves as she approached him. "Ruthless," she said plainly. "Too ruthless, even. I know they don't tire, but I didn't know you meant it literally. They were far stronger than the last time I saw them." She began to pace slowly as she spoke, her voice rising with each word. "There was a moment at the western gate one of the lords tried to rally a charge. Spurred his men forward, 70, maybe more, well armored, riding hard. One of your shadows stepped into the path alone. Just one soldier, no shield, just a dark sword in each hand and eyes glowing violet like yours." She stopped, eyes bright. He didn't move until the horses were nearly on him. And then, he carved through them like they were nothing, just men with sticks. Cut them from their saddles with a single stroke. I saw him pierce a knight through his helm with a downward thrust, splitting steel like soft cheese. Aeron chuckled quietly, but Raya wasn't done. "I barely had time to draw my blade, Aeron. They cleared the courtyard before I could lift my damn finger. The Unsullied tried to keep pace, but they were a step too slow. Always." She turned toward Grey Worm, eyebrow arched. Even Grey Worm here would admit as much. Grey Worm didn't flinch, only gave a single nod. "They kill without hesitation, without mercy," he said. "Even after the enemy tried to surrender." Aeron's eyes gleamed at that, pride flickering like embers in his expression. He looked to his knights, lined in silence, then back to the others. A sharp laugh escaped his lips, dark and satisfied. "Good," he said simply. "As long as innocents are unharmed, it's all good. I mean, I did order them to be merciless against everyone else." He turned, cloak flaring as he strode toward the blackened doors of Nightsong's ruined Great Hall. The shadows moved with him like loyal hounds. "Gather your strength," Aeron called. "We march west toward the Reach. I want our banners seen before the sun sets again." Raya frowned, catching pace beside him. "The Reach, already?" Aeron didn't slow. "Highgarden is not far from Nightsong, and depending on what answer I receive from the old lion in the rock, I may take the capital next. So we need to be quick about this." He paused at the threshold, his violet eyes narrowing at the horizon. "And I want all of you with me when I do. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. 10 comments 0 vote. Fear and Indecision. The Red Keep. Throne Room, Kingslanding. The throne room was dim, shrouded in silence but for the soft scraping of silk against stone as Queen Cersei paced before the Iron Throne. King Tommen sat upon it, his feet barely touching the floor, fingers twitching with uncertainty. Beside him stood Sir Kevin, silent. A small fire crackled weakly in the brazier near the dais, casting long shadows that danced like whispering ghosts. And there was Lord Baelish ever the serpent in a lion's den watching the queen with veiled intent. My queen, Baelish said at last, his voice oiled with caution, I believe it is time we consider the harsher alternative. Cersei turned on him swiftly, green eyes flashing. Not another word, Lord Baelish. Baelish inclined his head, lips pressed together in a courteous smile, though his eyes still burned with quiet urgency. Cersei turned her back on him, smoothing her gown as she looked up at her son, her boy, her king. Tommen, she began, voice softer now, calculated, we must begin thinking of alliances again. House Tyrell remains useful. A marriage might calm the seas. Marjorie is a sweet girl. She is also very willing. I've already spoke with the Tyrells. Tommen opened his mouth, unsure, but no words came. My queen, Baelish said again, more firmly now, forgive me, but this is not the time for talk of wedding veils and floral arrangements. That man Aeron Grim, he drank poisoned wine and lived. Lived. She turned toward him slowly, eyes narrowing like drawn blades. And how are you so certain the wine was poisoned? Baelish hesitated a moment, but the words came quick, precise. Because we tested it after. Poured it for 2 of the dungeons, peasants. They fell dead in 5 seconds, tongues black, eyes wide. The maesters confirmed it. There is no doubt. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. He is not just a man. Whatever else he is, sorcerer, demon, godless wraith, he is not natural. And we barely understand what he's capable of. Beyond his monstrous sorcery, there is something more. Something that cannot be bought or reasoned with. Cersei waved a hand, as if swatting away a bothersome gnat. And yet he didn't kill us. He had every chance. Not yet, Baelish pressed. But you saw what he did, what he could do. His dragon casts a shadow across the city walls. Lord Kevin here faced his soldiers in battle, he too saw death. She turned away again, lips tight, eyes glassy with the weight of thoughts unspoken. My queen, Baelish said, growing sharper now, denial will not save us. The north bends to him. The stormlands are falling like autumn leaves. Did you not see the beast he rides? That was not just a dragon. That was a terror. Even the Targaryen girls' dragons pale in comparison to that thing. Tommen shifted uncomfortably, his small voice finally breaking the silence. What does he want? Neither Cersei nor Baelish answered. The air turned heavy, the silence tense. And then clack. A slow, deliberate sound. The echo of boots against stone. All heads turned toward the great doors as they opened with ceremonial weight. The figure who stepped through needed no herald. He moved with grace unyielding, each footstep echoing. Hair glinted beneath the torches, the lines in his face carved like stone. Eyes like pale ice scanned the room with measured disdain. Tywin Lannister. The lion had returned. Enough, he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a sword. This room stinks of fear and indecision. Cersei turned at once, her face lifting with strained relief. Father, she said, stepping toward him. You're back. Baelish bowed his head slightly, ever the politician. Lord Tywin, he greeted, careful and smooth. Tywin gave him a glance sharp enough to draw blood. He strode further into the hall, his crimson cloak trailing behind him. I've heard what happened, he said. But I want to hear it from you, Lord Baelish. From your own lips. Baelish straightened. He didn't fidget, didn't blink. Of course, my lord. He stepped forward, voice calm but laced with a quiet tension. He came to the dragon pit on dragonback, one black beast and one so monstrous. Daenerys Targaryen rode her dragon. Aeron Grim rode something far worse. They landed together, but it was he who spoke. Calm, cold, he made it clear he seeks surrender. Tywin's brow twitched. Baelish continued. Not peace. Not negotiation. Surrender. He demands King Tommen step aside. That the Baratheons and Lannisters march out of this city, or he will raze these great houses to the ground. Tywin chuckled. A low, humorless sound. How generous of him. Baelish hesitated. For a heartbeat, he considered holding his tongue. But there was no wisdom in silence anymore. These people no longer know the line between reason and madness. Between strength and delusion, he thought. Lord Tywin, Baelish said carefully, he requested to send you a message personally. Had you been there, had you seen what we saw? The shadows, the poison, the dragons, the silence when he smiled. There is no winning or losing with someone like this. It took one meeting for me to understand that. Tywin's eyes narrowed. Are you calling me a coward for not being there, Littlefinger? The question hung like a blade over a gallows. Baelish took a slow breath, then dipped his head in a motion that was neither submission nor defiance. I wouldn't dare, my lord. But you, of all people, must see it. This is not a war we can win through gold or force of arms. We are not facing an upstart. He is death incarnate. Tywin took another step forward, his gaze unwavering. You are not someone that believes in that sort of things, Lord Baelish. So, we are to flee, then. Like whipped dogs. Leave the throne, the city, the realm, to a bastard with magic and shadow tricks. He looked to Cersei, to Tommen, to Kevin. All were silent. That will not happen while I still draw breath. Cersei smiled at that, a cold, cruel smile of vindication. Kevin looked away, discomfort plain in his face. Baelish stood still. Then, after a long pause, he bowed his head again. In that case, he said softly, forgive me, my lord hand. But I must relinquish my post. I am no longer fit to serve the crown. He turned. Cersei stepped forward at once. You dare walk out without your king's word or approval? She snapped. Baelish paused, turned slowly to the boy king. Tommen blinked. He looked at his mother, then at Baelish, lips parting as if to speak. But no sound came. Confusion painted his young face. Baelish offered a tight smile. Then he turned once more. Let him leave, Tywin said. Cersei opened her mouth, but Tywin raised a hand. I said let him go. Baelish did not look back. The great doors opened. And Littlefinger slipped quietly out of the throne room. Tywin turned to face the Iron Throne, Tommen seated atop it like a child in a soldier's armor, small hands gripping the armrest as if they might keep him steady. Cersei folded her arms, stiff with pride and paranoia. He's a coward, she muttered. Littlefinger never had the stomach for war. Or loyalty. Tywin did not look at her. He had the stomach to poison that man and face him in a meeting. She clenched her jaw, but said nothing. Kevin stepped forward at last, cautious. What now, brother? Baelish speaks true. We are facing a force beyond anything Westeros has known. Tywin's eyes swept the chamber, resting for a moment on the Iron Throne, then on Cersei. You waste breath bickering over shadows, he said. This man, this Grim, is not the first to ride dragons, nor the first to think himself invincible. He may possess strength, but strength without discipline is nothing. He will make a mistake. Cersei spoke carefully. And what if he doesn't make a mistake? He already seems to be winning the favor of several lords. Tywin's expression did not change. Baelish mentioned that he cares about his image, then we will force him to make a mistake. 2 comments 0 vote. Highgarden. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // The Reach, Highgarden. The sun dipped low, casting a golden hue over the sprawling fields of the Reach. Ahead, like a jewel embedded in a crown of green, rose Highgarden, its ivy-wrapped towers and flowering ramparts gleaming in the evening light. A dark procession stood poised at its borders. Aeron Grim, draped in his obsidian cloak, sat astride a shadow-forged steed, its mane a flicker of smoke and darkness. Beside him, lines of shadow solidars, knights, Dothrakis and beasts, stood unnaturally still, no breath, no twitch, no sound. Behind them, the Unsullied waited in disciplined formation, spears at their sides, shields at the ready. Raya, her armor scratched from battle but her poise sharp as ever, guided her horse next to Aeron's. Grey Worm stood on foot, his gaze fixed toward the distant walls of Highgarden with the patience of a predator. The rose of the Reach blooms tall, Raya said, half in jest, but her voice was low. Let's see how easily it wilts. Aeron's eyes, glowing faintly beneath his hood, remained on the distant castle. If we take the Reach, he said, the rest will follow. The Vale, what remains of the Crownlands? The Stormlands are ours. Dorne will not fight alone, they don't care about the realm or the crown, but I will conquer it as well. Only the Lannisters will resist out of pride. He turned slightly in the saddle, the movement so smooth it seemed the shadows themselves flowed with him. Tywin Lannister has 1 more day to send word. 1. If nothing comes, we burn Castle Rock and I'll take the capital alone by force. Raya raised a brow. You think he'll kneel? I think, Aeron said, he'll pretend not to. She leaned forward in her saddle, elbow resting lazily on the pommel of her sword. Then what? Do we send an envoy now to Highgarden? Offer a peaceful way? Or should we attack at once? Grey Worm stepped forward, his face hard, unreadable. Send no one. We attack. Highgarden is not Dragonstone. They are soft men behind soft walls. They know nothing of shadow, or fire. Raya scoffed. Even soft walls can hold if the men behind them believe they have the gods on their side. They will be wrong, of course. There is no fighting this after all. Aeron looked between them. The wind tugged at his cloak. Behind him Garm his shadow direwolf, let out a distant growl. I didn't want to bring death to every doorstep in the Stormlands to start playing the diplomat, Aeron said, though his voice was calm. But we aren't savages. And I'm not a monster that will just kill for the sake of killing. He raised one gauntleted hand and pointed to the rose banners fluttering in the wind above Highgarden's gate. Send a rider. 1. Offer them a chance. If they open the gates before sunset tomorrow, their soldiers and house will live. If they do not. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Grey Worm nodded. At once, Your Grace. Raya pulled her reins, turning toward Grey Worm. Wait, I'll go. Aeron turned his head, his glowing violet gaze resting on her. No, he said simply. Just send someone from the Unsullied. But Raya held his stare. Her voice was steady, her tone insistent. I insist, Aeron, the Unsullied are not of Westeros. These people won't see honor or parley in their faces. They'll see strangers, slaves, fodder. They will listen to me instead. A beat passed. Aeron watched her, the violet flicker in his eyes dimming in contemplation. Then, with a nod, he relented. Very well, but do not waste words. Do not plead. Just deliver the message and ultimatum. Either they accept, or they don't. It matters little. We are taking the Reach. Raya smiled, a sliver of her old sarcasm curling her lips. How ruthless you are, Shadow Monarch. She bowed mockingly in the saddle, then added, with more sincerity and a spark of admiration, I mean, Your Grace. I'll see it done. She struck her reins, and her horse leapt forward with powerful strides, racing through the dusk toward the rose-wrapped gates of Highgarden. Aeron watched her go, then turned slowly to Grey Worm and the line of unsullied officers behind him. We make camp here. For the night. Grey Worm gave a silent nod, turning to bark quiet orders to his men. But Aeron turned further toward the field behind him where the shadow soldiers stood like statues, as if waiting for breath or purpose. And suddenly they moved. Without a single word or sound, the shadows burst into coordinated motion. Black hands reached out and split the earth. Axes formed from smoke and steel, chopping trees faster than any man could dream. Tents, great and dark as war banners, unfurled. Fortifications rose in minutes, sharpened stakes plunged into the ground in precise formations. Bonfires were sparked, flickering with fire. Shadow beasts pulled carts. Inhuman speed and unholy strength turned hours of labor into a symphony of efficient terror in mere minutes. The Unsullied stood in rows, watching in muted awe. One of them muttered a prayer under his breath. Even Grey Worm, seasoned and stoic, blinked once. Just once. But it said enough. Within moments, a city of war had sprouted from the field black tents, guard towers, armories, trenches. At the center, the king's tent taller than the rest, ringed with obsidian stakes and guarded by unmoving shadow knights waited. Aeron dismounted. You guys went a bit too far, why trenches? He entered the tent, ducking slightly beneath the high threshold. Inside, a map of Westeros was already stretched across a war table, markers of glowing onyx indicating armies and holds. To his right, Grey Worm entered, still silent. To his left stood a grim assembly that would freeze any man's soul. At the front, cloaked in smoke and crimson eyes, stood Vidrus of Ashai. His armor was woven in darkness. His presence alone felt like a curse spoken aloud. Behind him, 3 shadow assassins, their faces masked and bodies cloaked in dark mist, appeared more illusion than real. Further back, 2 red-robed shadow priests, eyes glowing faintly. Grey Worm took a step forward, eyes narrowing as he looked upon the silent group. What are they? He asked, his voice low, as if to not awaken something terrible. Aeron moved to the table, hands resting on its edge, violet eyes never leaving the map. They are the ones who will get the job done, he said coolly, from within, should Highgarden choose pride over reason. Grey Worm glanced at Vidrus again. The elite Shadow Knight's head tilted just slightly as if he knew. Just them? Grey Worm asked, doubt in his voice for the first time in many moons. Aeron smiled. His violet eyes shimmered brighter. Yes, he said, just these guys. Highgarden, southern walls. The golden bloom of the Reach was dimmed by the coming of shadows. From atop the battlements of Highgarden, guards peered nervously across the fields. Where once rolling meadows stretched toward the horizon, now loomed a forest of black banners, obsidian tents, and eerie flickers of unnatural fire. Even the birds had fallen silent. A Tyrell sentry, young and tight-jawed, clutched the stone of the parapet and muttered, "Gods, what is that?" Another man stepped forward, his green cloak fluttering in the breeze. His armor gleamed like polished ivy, but there was steel beneath the roses. Sir Loras Tyrell, Knight of Flowers, narrowed his eyes. He didn't speak at first. But he saw it, he felt it. A camp built with impossible speed, set with a precision no mortal host could achieve. Silent ranks of unmoving soldiers like statues of shadow. No banners of known houses. No drums. No horns. Just a presence that bled into the air and poisoned the evening calm. So it's true, Loras said under his breath. What happened in the Stormlands? One of the older guards shifted beside him, licking dry lips. Sir. The shadows marched through the Stormlands. That not a single knight of the Stormlands matched their might or lived to tell the tale. That men died without their blades ever defeating one of these horrors. And now. He looked beyond the field toward the single horse rider approaching. Now they're here. The rider wore no helm. Her cloak was dark crimson. She bore no banner, no sigil. Raya. Loras straightened. Open the gate. A murmur of uncertainty rippled among the guards. But sir, that might be. I said open it. That's no scout. That's an envoy. They hesitated for a heartbeat longer before following his order. The gates of Highgarden creaked open, slow and heavy. The hooves of Raya's mount struck the stone like thunder as she rode in alone. Loras descended from the wall and stood waiting, his hand resting lightly on the pommel of his sword. His face was controlled, but his eyes searched, reading every line of her face, every twitch in the horse's step, every breath of unnatural wind that seemed to follow her like a second cloak. She dismounted without a word and met his gaze squarely. You must be an envoy, Loras said with careful courtesy. I assume you come from the man they call the Shadow Monarch. Raya nodded. I do. He glanced once more toward the camp behind her. Even at this distance, the shape of it unsettled him. He had seen armies before, proud hosts of banners and noise and banners. This one was silent, cold, exact. It's just like the rumors said, he murmured. So all of you are real. And now you've come for the reach. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. 8 comments 0 vote. The Thorn and the Shadow. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // Sir Loras Tyrell studied Raya for a while and then raised a hand. Close the gates. The great gates of Highgarden groaned shut behind Raya with a heavy finality, the echo of wood and iron reverberating through the stone courtyard. A dozen reach guards flanked her, spears in hand, eyes wary. Shadows from torches flickered across the stone walls. The heavy bar slammed down into place. And Raya, her crimson cloak sweeping the ground as she stepped forward, her posture sharp with purpose. I'm not here to bandy words with armored boys, she said coolly, voice echoing. I need to speak with the heads of House Tyrell, not some flower-decked knight-playing Lord of the Garden. A hush fell. One of the guards, a thick-jawed man with more pride than wit, stepped forward, face twisted in contempt. You're speaking to Sir Loras Tyrell, woman. He barked. Watch your tongue or lose it. Raya's hand was already on her hilt. Her sword slid free like a whisper of steel. Oh, and what are you? She asked with a venomous grin. His little pillow companion. Gasps rippled. The guards tensed, blades half drawn. Loras's eyes widened slightly, but his hand came up fast. Enough, he snapped, stepping between them. Gods, sheath your blades, all of you. This is not worth bleeding for, nor are we about to stain the courtyard over pride. Raya's grin deepened. She tilted her sword, the firelight gleaming along its edge. I've cut down better men for less, she muttered. Lady, Loras said more calmly now, come with me. And you shall speak to my grandmother. Raya paused. A beat passed. Then she slid her sword back into its scabbard with a sharp click, never breaking eye contact with the guard who'd spoken against her. As she turned to follow Loras, she raised a single gloved finger behind her, a rude gesture in any kingdom, but particularly vulgar in the Reach. The guard's face flushed with fury, but he dared not move. Loras merely shook his head as he led her inside, muttering under his breath, 7 save us all. A table of carved oak stretched before the lords and ladies of House Tyrell, strewn with maps, goblets, and plates of untouched fruit and bread. The air was perfumed with the scent of roses and summer wine, though none in the room looked particularly at ease. At the head of the room, Lady Olenna Tyrell, the Queen of Thorns herself, sat like a coiled viper draped in green silk, her cane resting beside her, eyes sharp as ever. To her left, the always anxious Mace Tyrell, cheeks pink from the heat of the discussion. Beside him stood Marjorie, poised and beautiful as ever, hands folded and gaze calculating. The doors creaked open. Sir Loras Tyrell stepped in with purposeful strides, the clink of armor behind him announcing the arrival of their guest. Grandmother, he said, may I present the envoy from the camp outside our gates? Sent by the man they call the Shadow Monarch. He stepped aside. Raya walked in, armored and a cloak dusted with dirt trailing behind her. She did not bow. Lady Olenna narrowed her eyes. A woman, she said, arching one brow. Well, that's strange. Raya offered a wry smile. Strange that you see one in armor and not in a dress of roses like you. There was a beat of silence. Then Olenna laughed a dry, rasping cackle that echoed across the chamber. Well, she said, tapping her cane once. At least you've got some teeth. Most women who walk into my presence spit apologies, not insults. She leaned forward, squinting. Now tell me, dear, why are you here? Raya's voice was cool and clipped. Very well then. It's not like I came for a chat with an old lady. I bring terms. Surrender, peacefully. Bend the knee to the true monarch of the Seven Kingdoms, and you shall be rewarded. Fight, and you will burn. Mace Tyrell stiffened. Marjorie tilted her head slightly, studying Raya with curious detachment. Olenna, however, barked another laugh. Bend the knee, she echoed, rising slowly to her feet. To some nobody, no house, no lineage, no name worth writing in ink. And, rewarded, for it, no less. You've already made me laugh, and now you'll make me puke. The guards stiffened. One moved half a step forward before Loras raised a hand to stop him. Raya's eyes flashed. You'll be puking blood if you refuse. Swords shifted in scabbards. A tense silence bloomed across the hall. Insolent woman, Mace blurted, face flushed. How can you call this an offer of peace? This is. Do shut up, Mace, Olenna snapped, not taking her eyes off Raya. Gods gave you a mouth for eating and a voice for ruining the mood. She took a few steps closer, gaze never wavering. I take it this king of yours doesn't take kindly to rejection. Raya's tone was ice. No, he does not. She stepped forward just a pace until she stood directly across from the Queen of Thorns. The two women, generations apart, locked eyes like wolves circling. Would you rather be the Lannisters' dogs? Dogs of a bastard born of incest no less. Raya asked. Over serving my king. The one who could have turned Highgarden into a shadowed grave before you even knew he was here, yet here I am, offering you the chance to live. Olenna stared long and hard at her, the weight of years behind her gaze. Then she smiled. But it wasn't kind. I've lived long enough to know what power looks like, girl, she said. And your king, your beast of a man, is powerful, there is no denying that, I've heard the stories. But the survival of my house is what matters to me. And that king of yours, he's not someone I can control. She leaned close, her voice like a whisper of thorns. I've danced with lions, serpents, and sparrows. But I don't kneel blindly to monsters. Raya stared at her for a moment longer. Then, without a word, she turned and strode to the doors. As she passed the guards, she gave Loras a glance, a flash of steel in her gaze, and stopped only once to smirk slightly at Marjorie. At the threshold, she said simply, so be it. Raya's voice echoed through the chamber, but then she stopped. She froze mid-step. Her head turned slightly, brows furrowed. The candlelight around her flickered unnaturally. One of the shadows on the wall moved, but she hadn't. A silence deeper than before crept through the room. Everyone felt it, though none could name it. Raya's voice was low, cold. Why did you come? From the wall, a shadow detached itself, a being cloaked in flowing black. It moved with unnatural grace, as though it were part of the darkness itself, sliding forward into the open floor before the Tyrells. Gasps erupted. Mace Tyrell stumbled back, knocking over a goblet of wine that shattered across the stone. Loras instinctively drew his sword, the steel ringing loud in the chamber. What sorcery is this? He barked, eyes wide. Marjorie stepped behind her grandmother, face pale but curious, while Olenna Tyrell gripped the top of her cane like it were a weapon. The Shadow Knight didn't speak. Instead, its form began to change. Slowly, like a storm rolling in. What had been void black armor began to ripple, contorting like smoke caught in wind. Its frame shifted, shoulders broadening, the helm receding. A faint, violet glow began to pulse from within the hollows of the Shadow's chest, then from its eyes two twin violet lights that glowed emerged. It was a revelation. The Shadow peeled back to reveal Aeron Grim, standing where the knight once was. The man's skin was pale, hair black as midnight. His features were sharp, unforgiving, with a mouth carved from silence and war. Those glowing violet eyes, unblinking and unnatural, swept across the room like a predator taking the measure of the herd. No one spoke. Even Olenna Tyrell, who had once insulted kings and mocked lords with her tongue sharper than steel, found herself caught just for a moment between fear and fascination. Aeron's lips curled into something not quite a smile. Hello, Tyrells. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL 16 comments 0 vote. The worth of a flower. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // Aeron Grim stepped forward calm, unbothered, his violet eyes glimmering like embers in the dark. The banners of House Tyrell swayed gently above, but not one soul in the great hall was calm. The moment his boot echoed on the stone floor, every guard in the chamber moved as one, swords drawn, shields raised, the polished steel of the reach bristling toward him. And then, one glance. That was all. A single, sweeping look from Aeron. His eyes burned brighter for the briefest moment, and then the wave struck. Bloodlust. It washed over them like a storm. Invisible, crushing, terrifying. Every man with a weapon dropped to his knees, panting, sweating, shaking. Their blades clattered across the marble like toys fallen from a child's grip. A few even whimpered, tears streaking down their faces as their minds struggled against the force bearing down on them. Raya didn't flinch. She'd seen it before. Across the room, Olenna Tyrell stood in awe. Her gnarled fingers clenched around the edge of her cane. Marjorie stiffened beside her, lips parted, a flicker of fear in her proud eyes. Tyrell staggered back behind each other as if it will shield them from this horror of a man. Aeron's steps echoed through the silence as he approached the gathered family. I anticipated this, he said, voice low but piercing. That you'd be stubborn. But this is just plain stupid. I expected more from you, Lady Olenna. You're smarter than this. The Queen of Thorns studied him. Her lips curled in disdain. I thought you'd be hideous, she said, head tilting slightly. A monster with claws and scales. Eyes like coals and breath like death. Instead, she waved her hand dismissively, you're just a man, rather handsome even. Yeah, Marjorie added, uncertain but defiant, even as her voice shook faintly. Totally not what I had in mind. Mace opened his mouth to speak, but only nonsense came out. This is preposterous. He can't. Silence, Mace, Olenna snapped without looking. Aeron's gaze never left her. What did you expect? He asked, voice like ice over still water. A beast, a demon, not that I can't be. But where's the wisdom in that? Is that how a king should be? He took another step. The guards remained on their knees, too broken to move. Raya stepped in beside him. I thought you said you wouldn't try to persuade them, she said, half teasing, her tone edged with exasperation. Isn't that exactly what you're doing right now? Aeron turned to her, the corner of his mouth twitching. Change of plans, he said softly. The reach is important, but House Tyrell isn't. Gasps filled the hall. Marjorie covered her mouth. Olenna's eyes narrowed. Then Aeron slowly drew his greatsword, its blackened blade etched with ancient markings, pulsing faintly with black flame. He raised it, pointing it toward them like a sentence passed. The Reach, he said, as a rich kingdom. Burn it, and the other kingdoms will starve. Chaos will follow. Olenna's lip curled into a smile. But Aeron wasn't finished. My army doesn't tire, doesn't eat, doesn't drink, and certainly doesn't get paid for their efforts. He paused, letting the weight of it settle like a noose. You understand what I'm saying, don't you? He leaned forward slightly, violet eyes glowing. If I were a mindless monarch, I'd kill whoever stands in my path. Lay ruin to every field, every hall, every city. Because unlike your lords and kings, I have nothing to lose. The silence was absolute. Even Olenna did not speak right away. But her eyes sharp as ever locked with Aeron's, calculating the weight of those words, the cold truth behind them, and the shadow rising just beyond the gates of Highgarden. And for the first time in decades, she wasn't sure what play was left to make. Aeron walked to the center of the hall. None dared to make eye contact, his violet eyes burning faintly. Mace Tyrell had retreated behind a wide table, his expression dazed and pale. Marjorie sat upright but frozen, her hands clenched in her lap. Loras stood beside his sister, tense as a bowstring. But it was Olenna who kept her eyes steady on him. The Queen of Thorns adjusted her brooch, eyes narrowing. Now that I've seen how you showed up here, sorcery and all that, she said, voice sharp and unwavering, I want to ask you something. Aeron nodded, lips twitching faintly. Ask away. She didn't miss the humor. She never did. The crown kept it quiet, she began, circling slightly, like a wary lioness. Very few ever heard what truly happened. And even fewer believed it. But I've always had a nose for rot. That until the Battle of Storm's End. She paused, letting the silence stretch. I didn't believe it at first. But then, our banners marched with theirs. I sent men of my own. None returned. A Lannister Baratheon Tyrell army crushed by wraiths, shadows, beasts that did not bleed nor break. Her gaze hardened. And now here you are, the commander of that wraith army. Aeron's voice was cool, unbothered. You're not wrong. She stepped forward, chin lifted. King Joffrey, it was you who killed him. A pause. A flicker of something in his gaze. Then, that's it. Olenna raised a brow. You sound disappointed. Aeron tilted his head. Yes, I killed him. I did the realm a favor. Mace made a choked noise, half a gasp, half a whimper. Loras shifted on his feet. Margiery's eyes narrowed. Olenna, however, only let out a sigh. Funny thing, that, I was planning to wed my granddaughter to the little beast. Even planned his death. She leaned on her cane, her voice hardening. Because there's no god's damned way I'd let one of my blood mix with that golden-haired stain on the throne. Aeron's lips curled faintly. And, Olenna arched a brow. A thank you, for starters. Aeron let out a quiet laugh. It was the sound of cold steel scraping against silk. Olenna didn't flinch. But I see it now. I see what you are. You don't care for the realm. You don't want to save it. You don't want to rule it. You are not in this for gold, not for glory. Just for control. And I suppose your silver-haired queen will do the ruling. You'll be the sword. The smile on Aeron's face widened. Bravo, he murmured, amused. You are truly impressive. He stepped forward, shadows dancing around his cloak like smoke rising from a battlefield. What is your answer now? The room went silent again. Olenna's expression tightened. She looked back at her family, her trembling son, her granddaughter with the calculating gaze, her proud grandson who now stood unsure of his place. She exhaled through her nose. Very well, she said at last, voice brittle. As long as it's not one of Cersei's bastards. I suppose we can agree. But I have one condition. Aeron chuckled darkly. That's not an option, but your wit amuses me. I'll hear your condition. The Queen of Thorns squared her shoulders. I care about House Tyrell. I always have. The Reach is more than golden harvests and pretty flowers, it is the spine of this realm. It must have a voice on your small council. Aeron gave a slight nod. Expected. But she wasn't done. Her gaze flicked to Margaery, who straightened slightly. And, Olenna added, her tone sharpened like a dagger hidden in lace, my granddaughter. She is pure yet. She is to be your queen. There was a collective intake of breath. Loras's jaw tightened. Marjorie's eyes widened just for a breath, then returned to that courtly stillness she'd mastered. Aeron didn't move. Then, slowly, he tilted his head. You are asking too much now, Lady Olenna. I know I do. You are already entangled with the Dragon Queen, but you are a king, are you not? It is fine in nobility. Even if you are not one, you are still a king. She snapped back. And also because I have earned that right to ask much. I've kept this house standing while men have tried to tear it down for generations. And I will not let it fall into ruin. My blood must continue. Raya raised an eyebrow, watching quietly from the shadows behind Aeron. The Shadow Monarch finally spoke, voice low but calm. I'll see if she is worthy of that title. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL 12 comments 0 vote. 3 days of grace. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // Dragonstone, the courtyard before the keep. The wind screamed off the sea, carrying the salt-stung scent of the Blackwater Bay. Clouds swirled above Dragonstone and the sky churning gray and cold, as if the island itself sensed what was coming. And then they heard it. The rush of wings. A shrieking thunderous cry. Drogon appeared first, dark and terrible, soaring from the mists. The cannibal followed, a monstrous shadow that eclipsed everything, its scarred shadow scales and tattered wings whispering of old bygone times. The ground trembled when they landed, claws cracking stone, tails whipping the air into chaos. Missandei stepped forward, dark curls caught in the wind. Tyrion stood beside her, squinting up through the gloom. Varys, his hands folded into his robes, merely watched. Daenerys Stormborn dismounted Drogon with grace, boots striking the ground hard. Her silver hair blew wild in the wind. There was no softness in her face. Her eyes were fire. Tyrion took a breath and stepped forward. Your Grace, he said with a small bow. You've returned sooner than expected. We feared. Your Grace, welcome back. Where is Aeron? Varys asked, cutting in, his gaze flicking toward the black shadow still crouched behind her like a mountain of death. Daenerys didn't answer at first. She walked past them with a sweep of her cloak, her face carved from stone. We'll talk inside. Missandei cast a quick look at Tyrion and Varys, then followed silently. The 2 men were left standing alone in the whipping wind, dragons looming behind them, the storm brewing in more ways than one. Tyrion blinked, watching the Silver Queen vanish through the doors of the keep. Well, he muttered, adjusting his cloak, either Westeros is burning, or she just lost a very ugly argument with her king. Varys arched a brow. She's not pleased. Do you think it's the, I'll burn your house down, kind of not pleased, or the, we need to have a long talk about a Setrain problem, sort? With a dragon queen, Varys said softly. Perhaps my friend. Both. Tyrion turned back toward the dragons. Drogon had already begun to settle, but the cannibal still loomed, tail twitching like a lion's. The beast didn't rest. It watched. Tyrion cleared his throat, stepping back a pace. Tell me that thing sleeps. I'm not that informed about dragons, let alone a dragon made of shadows, said Varys. I don't think it does. They exchanged a long look. Inside the keep, the sound of boots echoed through stone halls. The queen was back home. Inside the chamber of the painted table, the firelight flickered across the great map of Westeros carved into aged oak. Daenerys stood at its head, her posture rigid, one hand pressed to the cold wood, eyes fixed on King's Landing. Missandei lingered near her, silent, attentive, though not unaware of the storm brewing behind her queen's violet gaze. The doors creaked open. Tyrion entered first, his steps casual but his eyes sharp, followed closely by Varys. They had been waiting on the cliffs when the dragons arrived, Drogon and the cannibal, descending like twin omens. Neither of them missed the way Daenerys had stalked past them without a word. Now, in the warmth of the strategy chamber, they sensed the heat hadn't faded. Tyrion's eyes drifted to the table, then to the queen. Well, I suppose now would be the right moment to ask how it went. Daenerys didn't answer immediately. Her jaw tensed before she spoke, voice low and sharp. I was sent back, like a child that needed to be protected. Tyrion blinked, lifting an eyebrow. I see. Is that a bad thing? She turned to face them fully, firelight dancing in her eyes. We took Harrenhal. The Riverlands yielded. House Tully bent the knee. Except, back in the capital, they attempted to poison us. Varys stiffened where he stood, a shadow falling over his expression. Poison. In King's Landing. Tyrion's brow furrowed, the edges of sarcasm in his tone thinning. Wait, what were you doing in the capital? I thought the next step was securing the remaining great houses. Daenerys stepped around the table slowly, fingers brushing its carved edges. We were invited. Peace talks, they said. After the Tullys swore fealty, the crown sent a raven. Tyrion let out a bitter chuckle. How expected from my beloved father. Her expression hardened. Before that, we captured your brother. Jaime was holding a keep in the Riverlands under the Lannister banner. He was taken prisoner by Aeron before we flew toward King's Landing. Tyrion's expression faltered. A visible shift passed over his face, confusion, then concern, and something else beneath it. Where is he now? Daenerys turned, walking to the edge of the painted table. Her hand hovered briefly above the city carved in the Crownlands. Aeron handed your brother back to the crown. Tyrion stared at her, speechless for a moment. The tension in his shoulders loosened slightly, though the confusion remained. A glance was exchanged between him and Varys. Neither understood, not fully. Varys was the first to voice it. What does that mean? What's the point of capturing Jaime Lannister only to return him unharmed? I asked the same, Daenerys said. But Aeron said he left something within him. Something that will lead him toward a certain goal. A strange man, Varys muttered, folding his hands behind his back. Daenerys shot him a look, sharp and warning. Varys nodded once. King. Strange king. She turned to Missandei. Any word from Grey Worm? Missandei nodded. The Stormlands have been taken. All of it. A shadow appeared, one of the king's soldiers, and delivered a letter. They are marching for the Reach. Tyrion exhaled, running a hand down his face. Gods help the Tyrells. Daenerys stood with her back straight, her eyes lingering on King's Landing carved into the old oak beneath her. Her jaw tightened slightly, her voice was low. No, she said, the words deliberate, final. We should say Gods help King's Landing. She clasped her hands behind her back and turned toward them, her violet eyes hard with a fire that hadn't dimmed since the attempt on their lives. Tyrion's lips parted slightly as he exchanged a glance with Varys. Confusion clouded the air. The silence pressed for answers. What do you mean, Your Grace? Tyrion asked, voice quieter now. Daenerys paced around the table, her footsteps soft and firm, echoing off the stone floor. After the attempt on our lives in the capital, Aeron gave them a warning. A simple choice. Yield, give up the crown, or watch the Red Keep and Castle Rock burn. Tyrion blinked, stunned into momentary silence. Simple. Not for my father, that's for certain. So he threatened both. She nodded once. 3 days. That's what he gave them. Varys' brows drew together in concern. Tyrion turned toward him. Any ravens from King's Landing or Castle Rock? Tyrion asked. Varys shook his head slowly, the gesture quiet, almost reluctant. None. Daenerys stopped near the reach, glancing briefly over the golden rose carved into the wood before turning back. It has already been 2 days. And as you can see, she gestured toward the map, the city's still whole, untouched at least on wood. Your father and your nephew are both idiots. Tyrion's mouth twisted in bitter amusement. My nephew is not the one doing the ruling, and you know that, Your Grace. Daenerys met his gaze, unwavering. He wears the crown. It does not matter. A boy who lets others speak and act for him is still the king in name, and he'll burn as one once things go horribly wrong. Tyrion turned away, the firelight revealing the strain on his face. The thought of his house and his innocent nephew, reduced to ash, didn't sit well, no matter how many ghosts it held. Then Varys cleared his throat gently. Pardon me, Your Grace. No news from the Lannisters, but there have been other reports. Strange ones. Daenerys arched an eyebrow. Strange. Varys stepped forward and pointed at the painted table, fingers gliding across several small holds and towns dotted in the Crownlands. Hayford Castle, Stokeworth, and a dozen more like them. All sending word of sudden raids, nighttime attacks by riders clad in black. Silent. Deadly. No looting. No demands. Just death. Entire garrisons, peasants, women, even children slaughtered and left in silence. Daenerys frowned. Bandits. Varys shook his head. No gold taken. No supplies. No women taken. These aren't brigands. The common folk, they're calling them Black Knights. Daenerys narrowed her eyes. And who are these knights supposed to be serving? Varys met her gaze with quiet weight. They are saying it's the work of the Shadow Monarch. The room fell into silence. Even the fire seemed to hush itself for a moment. Daenerys' eyes widened slightly, not in fear, but in realization. Her thoughts flashed to Aeron, to the cold fury in his voice after the poison, the stillness in his presence that made dragons hesitate, but she understood it wasn't him. They are trying to make the common folk hate him, she said at last. Varys nodded slowly. Yes, Your Grace. It seems very much like Tywin's doing. Missandei, quiet till now, stepped forward slightly. Then he doesn't mean to win the war, he means to erase his enemy's image. Even in the face of defeat, he is trying to win a different type of war. Daenerys turned her gaze back to the table. King's Landing lay under her shadow now, as if fate itself was playing her hand. She spoke, more to herself than the room, but the words were clear. So be it. Fire and blood then. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL 9 comments 0 vote. Oaths and promises. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // Highgarden, the gates overlooking the Rosair Road. The golden light of late afternoon bathed the sprawling fields beyond Highgarden in a soft glow. From atop the battlements, the banners of House Tyrell still fluttered beside a black sigil of the Shadow Monarch, a creeping darkness sewn into silk, eerily still despite the wind. Below, the Rose Road trembled beneath the weight of war. Formations of Unsullied moved in precise columns, silent, disciplined, deadly. At their head, Grey Worm rode without expression, his armor marked by a red, flared sigil at the shoulder, the Targaryen sigil. To his right, a force unlike anything Westeros had known marched with no music, no banners, only silence and the thud of armored boots. Raya, cloaked in black and bearing eyes that shimmered with eerie life, led the Shadow Knights, men long dead, now walking, bound in eternal service. And behind them came a force of Tyrell soldiers, their green and gold bright against the grim tide they followed, unsure if they were marching to glory or judgment. Aeron stood still, his cloak caught gently by the wind. At his side, Lady Olenna Tyrell stood with her hands resting on her cane, watching her house's banners disappear down the road. The realm will be better for it, she muttered, her voice dry as old parchment. Without the Lannisters. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Tywin Lannister will not kneel. Not even with your beasts and your shadows at the gates. A battle is inevitable. Aeron didn't look at her. His gaze was locked ahead, watching the road like a man reading a prophecy. I gave him too many chances, he said calmly. I could have ended him long ago. I could do it now. All it takes is a mere moment. Olenna glanced sideways at him, frowning. He continued. But I wanted him to serve. He's clever, dangerously so. He knows the bones of this realm. Its nerves. Its old blood. If not for that damned pride, that disease in his bloodline that makes him crave power without name or crown, he'd make a fine hand. Olenna barked a soft laugh, bitter and amused. Good luck with that. Tywin serves no one. He plays king from behind the curtains, and even now, he's probably dreaming of how to turn your queen, your dragons, wraiths and whatever walks with you against you. Aeron's mouth tugged at a smile cold, distant. He'll find nothing but fire and death waiting for him. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the last ranks of men disappear down the Road. Dust rose behind them like a creeping storm cloud. Aeron spoke again. Your men will return safely to the Reach. You have my word. Olenna turned to him, one eyebrow lifted. Well, that's strange, she said absently. Aeron looked at her. What is? She tilted her head, lips pursing into a thin line. Nothing, Your Grace. Nothing at all. She turned to leave, her steps slow, measured. But before vanishing down the stone steps, she looked back, her eyes hard as steel. Once King Landing falls and the bastards no longer soils the crown, we will be there, for the promise. Aeron's gaze narrowed. He sighed and looked back toward the horizon. I haven't agreed to that yet, he said, voice quieter. I know, Olenna said without turning. But you're a clever king. You'll know what you must do. He didn't answer. The weight of her words hung in the air as she disappeared into the tower. Aeron watched the fading sunlight for a moment, then exhaled through his nose, muttering under his breath. This old woman. And then, as easily as a breath, he said aloud, exchange. His form shimmered, his entire body unraveling into dark threads that vanished into the air. In his place, a single shadow soldier remained, standing still in his image. Olenna, halfway down the steps, turned at the sound behind her. She saw the empty space where he had stood, only the soldier now, still and silent, like a cursed statue. She blinked once. Oh, gods, she muttered. These are strange times. And I will not get used to this. She kept walking, muttering to herself all the way down the stairs. Winterfell, the courtyard. Snow fell gently across the gray stones of Winterfell, soft and constant, blanketing the towers and walls in white. The wind carried a biting chill, but it was the kind the North knew well, clean, calm, the usual. A shadow peeled into being just beyond the outer gates, silent, smooth, like smoke unraveling from the air. And then, from that shadow, a man stepped forward. A black cloak, darker than the night around him, whispered behind him as he walked. His hair, darker than his shadow, his presence stilled the air like the silence before a storm. Aeron Grim, the Shadow Monarch, had returned to Winterfell. The guards at the walls reached for weapons at first, until one among them squinted and dropped to a knee. Your Grace. Others followed, murmurs spreading across the courtyard. The wildlings who'd come to settle in the North Weatherworn and Wary watched with suspicion, but said nothing. Some of them had heard tales. A man of the shadows. A king who walked with death and flame. A whisper in the snow that meant war was near. The Northerners, especially those who had seen him here before, knew better. A few stepped back with respect. Others lowered their heads. One knight removed his gloves and pressed his fist to his chest. Your Grace, he said again, firmer this time. Aeron glanced about as he passed. The stone beneath his boots was unchanged, but the people were not. Free folk walked among Winterfell's walls, tending to fires, sharing bread with northern soldiers. The sight drew a small breath from him, not quite a smile. So Robb did keep his word, he murmured to himself. And he let the wildlings settle. A small relief. In this world of shifting loyalties and quiet betrayals, honor still lived in the north. He passed the weirwood tree without pause, making his way toward the inner keep. There, seated under the stone arch overlooking the yard, was Bran Stark, quiet and still. His eyes, wise beyond his years, watched as young Rickon loosed an arrow at a straw dummy and cheered when it struck the shoulder. Aeron stepped forward. Bran turned his head before he arrived, as though he'd felt the shadow long before it fell upon him. King Aeron, Bran said with calm certainty. You're always arriving in silence. I prefer it that way, Aeron replied, stepping beside the boy. No, the man, despite appearances, and lowering himself to sit. Bran tilted his head faintly, his gaze unmoving. You look like you've been through 100 battles, Bran said. And yet, not tired at all. Aeron gave a short exhale. Not yet. There was a moment of quiet. The wind rustled through the yard. Rickon missed the next shot and let out a frustrated grunt. We weren't expecting to see you here, Bran said. Otherwise my brother would have stayed. I needed to see something with my own eyes, Aeron said. And about Robb. Bran didn't react with alarm, only looked ahead. He left not long ago. Headed for Castle Black. Aeron's brow tightened slightly. Something happened. He didn't say it to Bran, more to himself. He crossed his arms, thinking. I left some nights here, and I've had a shadow near Jon for moons. He's fine. Jon is still fine, so. Bran spoke gently. It's nothing urgent. Just a matter between the wildlings and the Night's Watch. Something about land, and who speaks for whom. Robb thought it better to deal with it himself. He doesn't like leaving things to others, not when they concern the North. Either Robb lied to his brother, or he is actually telling the truth. Either way, I don't think it's a simple matter, Aeron thought to himself and studied Bran for a moment. The boy's voice was calm, no hint of deception. Thank you, now I'm interested about this problem, Aeron said finally, rising. Bran nodded without looking at him. You are going to do that again, right? The thing where you disappear, won't you? Right, Aeron replied with a smile. Bran's lips curled faintly. Safe travels, Your Grace. Aeron tilted his head in quiet respect. Then, with no warning, no fanfare, he uttered the word like a spell. Exchange. In a blink, he was gone, his figure unraveling into nothing but swirling mist and silence. In his place stood one of his shadows. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. 9 comments 0 vote. Time's out. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // Castle Black. The wall. The wind howled like a beast, sweeping across the top of the wall with such ferocity that even the snow seemed to hiss. The sky above was the color of slate, bleak and endless, and the land beyond the wall, the true north, was nothing but a pale wasteland of frost and silence. Robb Stark stood beside Jon Snow atop the ancient wall, both wrapped in thick black furs. Their cloaks whipped behind them, raven black and snow-dusted, as they looked out over the expanse. Below, Castle Black buzzed with unlikely life. Free folk tending fires, giants lumbering past watchmen, the clang of steel echoing from the yard where wildlings and rangers trained together. It was a sight neither man could have imagined in years past. Hell, a month passed. Yet here they were, brothers on the edge of the world. Robb's breath steamed in the cold as he spoke. Is it true, brother? He asked, voice low. The dead are approaching. Jon didn't answer right away. His eyes remained fixed on the horizon, on that unmoving, frozen line where sky met land. Some of our scouts never returned, Jon said quietly. That's your answer. Robb nodded, his expression tightening. He crossed his arms, his wolf fur mantle folding in closer. We've allowed as many wildlings into the north as we could, he said. It wasn't easy convincing the Bannermen. You know how they are. Proud men, suspicious of anything that doesn't sound like the old ways. He let out a faint, humorless laugh. But they agreed in the end. Not for love of me, I think. They saw what happened to Roose Bolton, and I fear they obeyed more from fear of Aeron Grim than loyalty to House Stark. Jon chuckled, the sound dry as the wind. I can't blame them. He does scare me, too. That earned a proper laugh from Robb. Well, that's something, coming from you, Lord Snow. Jon smirked, but his eyes remained grim. Someone with that kind of power, maybe that's what the realm needs. Not another lord with pretty words. A true sword, one that will strike when needed. Robb looked down at Castle Black, the strange harmony of wildling and watch forming slowly, painfully. I can't deny it, he said. The place is different now. I passed giants on my way through the yard. Giants, Jon, and wildlings mending walls, training with brothers of the watch. I never thought I'd see the day. Aeron forced a change, we do have a common enemy after all. Jon said. True enough, Robb muttered. Then he glanced sideways. But what of the Lord Commander? I haven't seen him since I set foot here. The men say he left days ago. Jon nodded, finally pulling his eyes from the white expanse. They went ranging, took a sizable force. Rangers, wildlings, some of the old watch veterans. Mance Rayder went with them. Mance, Robb said, surprised. Their leader, right? Still stubborn, Jon replied with a smirk. But useful. He knows the land, the people. They're not looking for whites, not yet. They're looking for survivors, any alive folk hiding beyond the wall before it's too late. And of course not to give them any more soldiers. Robb narrowed his eyes, watching the horizon again. Were they armed as instructed by Aeron? Yes, Jon said. Fire spitters, dragonglass blades and spears. Most of it shipped straight from Dragonstone. Robb let out a slow breath. Let's hope he's right. About the weapons. About all of it. Jon didn't answer right away. He looked out into that terrible stillness one more time, past the frost, past the ruined outposts and dead forests. Somewhere out there, the night stirred again. And they were the last light standing. Aye, he said finally. Let's hope. The word echoed in the frost-thick silence, then faded like breath on glass. But something shifted. A subtle ripple moved beneath Jon's feet, quiet as a whisper but wrong cold in a way that had nothing to do with the wind. A slither of black smoke, almost liquid, poured outward from Jon's own shadow, crawling with unnatural grace across the icy stone. Robb drew a breath, his hand twitching instinctively toward his sword, though he didn't unsheath it. The shadow rose, stretching and twisting, forming limbs, a face, armor, a silent warrior of dark mist and fireless flame. Its eyes glowed faintly, not like a man, but like an omen. It bowed once, then dissolved into smoke again. And then he was there. Aeron Grim stepped forward, the shadow mist drawing back like a curtain. His boots crunched softly on the frost-rimmed stones. His long black coat fluttered in the wind, and his presence sharp, heavy, unnatural rolled over them. His eyes glowed that unholy violet, glowing in his pale face. Hope, he repeated, voice calm, low and hard. Everything I've told you is true. Hope will not help you defeat your enemies. He stepped closer, looking between the brothers. Only strength will. Robb narrowed his eyes, his voice tight. Aeron. Aeron turned his gaze toward him, cold. Not a good thing, Robb Stark, to lie to your brother about what you plan to do here. Jon glanced at Robb, frowning. Lied. About what? Robb didn't blink, but there was a flicker of guilt in his face. Your presence that day in Winterfell already made my people panic, fear and alarmed, he said, his voice firm but edged with weariness. I can't tell them that death is marching from the north. You'd have every northern hall filled with fear and madness. Better they're armed and unaware than helpless and terrified. At least for now, since the enemy isn't showing himself or itself or whatever that thing is. Aeron took a slow breath, his gaze not accusing, just cold, calculating. You have nothing to fear, he said. I've already promised you and the entire north, when the Night King shows himself, I will deal with him. I cannot allow him to venture south. With that, Aeron strode past them toward the edge of the wall, his black cloak rippling like wings behind him. He looked out over the north, that endless white sea of death and silence. His violet eyes narrowed. I can't sense the bastard, that's the problem, he murmured. So he needs to show himself first. From his shadow, the ground rippled once more and a sound like rustling silk filled the air. Long, lean shapes burst from the black shadow beneath him. Shadow wyverns. 6 of them. Born from darkness, wings spread wide, blacker than a starless sky. They hissed softly, as if impatient, and then took to the skies with supernatural grace, heading northward, vanishing into the distance like smoke in the wind. Jon stared, speechless. Robb exhaled a slow breath, shaking his head. I can't get used to this, Jon muttered, eyes still fixed on the sky. Aeron didn't turn. Well, you will. Then, a pause. I have a matter to attend to, Aeron said, his voice already fading, then I'll return here again shortly. Robb looked at him sharply. You'll disappear again. Aeron turned then, slowly. His face was calm, but his eyes burned brighter, like amethyst set aflame. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. A certain person, he said softly, ran out of time, you see. And then he vanished, folding into the wind, a black mist whisked away, only his shadow soldier remained in his place. Robb stared into the shadow creature and where the Shadow Monarch had stood just moments ago. Jon let out a low breath. This realm really has changed since Father passed. Robb murmured. No, Jon said. It's changing still. Any idea who might be this person he's talking about? Robb asked, more to himself than anyone. Jon didn't answer right away. He stood with arms folded, watching the shadows left behind by the wyverns slowly dissolve in the sky. Then he turned, his eyes meeting his brother's. I don't know, Jon said quietly. But one thing I know is. Gods help him. There was weight in his voice, not just pity, but understanding. A grim respect for whatever fate awaited the poor soul Aeron had set his sights on. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL 6 comments 0 vote. Lion and Shadow. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // Red Keep. The Hands Solar, Night. Candlelight flickered along the stone walls of Tywin Lannister's chamber. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting long shadows across the crimson and gold tapestries of House Lannister. A map of Westeros lay stretched across his table, markers and figures aligned around King's Landing, the Reach, and the Riverlands, but too few remained near the capital. Tywin stood rigid behind the table, his hands resting on its edges, jaw tight. Across from him, Jaime paced agitated, his hand tapping lightly against his side. You've not seen it, father, Jaime said, his voice edged with frustration. But I have. That beast of his, that dragon if you wanna call it that. It didn't flinch when it took a scorpion bolt. As a matter of fact, I think it ate it if my eyes didn't deceive me that day. It didn't fall, didn't slow, just screamed and burned everything in its path. Tywin did not look up. A dragon is a weapon, like any other. And all weapons have their weaknesses. Jaime gave a short, breathless laugh. Gods, you're really saying that? A dragon, a weapon with wings the size of castles and fire that melts stone. Do you realize what you are saying, father? The Targaryens had dragons for centuries and still lost everything in the end. What matters is not the flame, but the hand that wields it. Tywin finally looked up, cold and sharp-eyed. Do not mistake spectacle for victory, son. You call it spectacle, Jaime said, stepping closer, but I saw our men die like ants under a magnifying glass. That army of his. Those shadows, whatever they are, they don't seem to have a soul. I've talked with Uncle and he told me what he saw. And then there's him. This monarch. Do you even know what he is? The way he talked to me, the weird sensation I got from him. It felt like death. He kept me alive just to prove a point. Tywin's gaze turned back to the map. I know he bleeds. That's enough. Jaime exhaled sharply through his nose and shook his head. It's strange that I'm the smart one in the room now. Yet I don't feel any sort of satisfaction. Tywin's eyes flickered with the faintest hint of irritation. You are not being clever, you are being afraid. Fear makes cowards of the best men. What you saw was power, but power unchecked breeds arrogance. And arrogance can be led into ruin. Isn't that what you are doing now? Is pride blinding you, father? And your grand plan? Jaime scoffed. Bandits and butchers committing crimes and claiming to be heralds of this shadow monarch, killing peasants in villages no one remembers. You think that will turn the realm against him? That's your play. Tywin straightened, his hands folding neatly behind his back. There are no victories without sacrifices. The people need a story to believe. Fear makes tyrants, but fear also makes martyrs. I will decide which he becomes. Jaime stepped in front of him, blocking the exit. It's not enough, father. With all due respect, it's been 3 days, and he already made an ultimatum. No Raven, no reply. You say you'll ride for Castle Rock now, but maybe you're just running. Tywin halted mid-step, his boots stopping hard against the stone. For a long breath, he said nothing. Then slowly, he turned. His face was carved from stone, but his voice carried iron. Choose your words carefully, Kingsguard, or son, if you still call yourself that. I have sacrificed more than you could imagine for this house. You speak of running, but you should abandon that white cloak and return to where you belong. The family needs heirs, not honorable idiots. You are starting to sound like that stark fool. There's no place for sentiment when the lions are surrounded by predators. Jaime clenched his jaw, his hand curling into a fist. He didn't answer. Tywin took a step past him then stopped. A sudden shiver rippled through the air. The fire in the hearth flickered unnaturally low, casting a cold light across the chamber. The temperature dropped, subtle at first then biting. Both men turned instinctively. Jaime's hand twitched, moving to the hilt of his sword. He didn't draw it but the motion was immediate, trained, survival-driven. His breath caught in his chest. Tywin Lannister didn't flinch, but his eyes narrowed to slits as he scanned the room. The air was colder than stone walls had any right to be in this city. The fire in the hearth dimmed to a low, whispering ember. Silence stretched like a wire between them. And then, it moved. From the floor where Jaime's own shadow stretched in the low firelight, something began to separate. The shape writhed, curling upward with an unnatural grace fluid like smoke, yet solid, growing with form and weight. It wasn't a man. It wasn't even human. A panther-like beast emerged from the black. A shadow cat, sleek and silent, made of living darkness. Its fangs were long and pale as moonlight, its eyes twin pinpricks of eerie violet glow. It walked forward, each step soundless on the stone, its tail flicking lazily behind it like a serpent ready to strike. Jaime stumbled back half a step. Gods, he muttered under his breath. It's definitely him, one of his shadows. Tywin remained still, but there was a shift in his posture. A stiffness, a silent, calculating tension behind his eyes. The shadow cat turned its head slowly, locking eyes with Tywin. It bared its fangs and growled. Not the growl of a creature hungry for meat. It was a warning, a promise. Then it dispersed, collapsing into itself with a hiss of mist-black smoke trailing upward like ash on the wind. From the smoke stepped a figure. Clad in black, trimmed in faintly shimmering threads of violet. A cloak flowed behind him like torn shadow. His face was pale and noble, features carved from battles and wisdom, but it was his eyes that commanded the room. Twin amethysts lit from within, burning and unnatural. Aeron Grim, the Shadow Monarch. He stepped forward slowly, and with every footfall the torches on the walls guttered low, dimming, retreating from his presence like servants shying from their master. His gaze swept across the room first to Jaime, then to Tywin, holding the old lion's eyes without a blink. When he spoke, the air seemed to listen. Lannisters. The word was cold, not a greeting, an accusation. Jaime opened his mouth, closed it, then spoke low and with grudging awe. You left something with me, didn't you? He looked toward where the shadow had emerged. You never really let me go. Aeron's eyes did not leave Tywin. I leave nothing to chance. I know you would meet your father sooner or later. It will save me the time to find his exact location. Tywin said nothing for a long moment. But his jaw flexed once ever so slightly, and his eyes, those sharp eyes that had stared down kings and broken men alike, showed something they never had before. A flicker of fear. Still, his voice was iron. You've come to threaten me, then? Is that it? Aeron took another step forward, slow. I have yet to decide, Lord Tywin, depends on your words in the next 5 minutes. I gave you ample time already to consider the reasonable option, yet I didn't get a clear answer. The room dropped into stillness. Even the fire dared not crackle. I gave you 3 days, Aeron continued, voice smooth as velvet and cold as the grave. 3 days to yield, to bend the knee, to see the realm survive the storm I am holding at bay. Instead, he glanced at Jaime. You try to stir chaos. Spread lies. Send killers into the dark in hopes they might stain me with blood not of my making. Tywin didn't move, but his fingers curled tightly behind his back. A king who needs to silence true lords with monsters is no king at all. Aeron tilted his head, a faint smile touching his lips though his eyes did not change. A king, he said softly, and yet, you bent the knee to boys, bowed to madness, your once great name will be spoken in hatred and sorrow by the very people you broke. Your house will be reduced to ashes after you're gone. Tell me, Lord of Castle Rock, what throne did you ever sit on? Jaime stepped forward slightly, eyes flicking between them. Father, maybe this isn't the fight we want. I needed no throne. I ruled those who sat on it. Tywin ignored Jaime and his voice was like steel drawn in the dark. And when the world speaks of Lannister, it speaks of power. Long after your shadows vanish, my name will remain. Can your monsters leave behind bloodlines, boy? // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL 10 comments 0 vote. Lion's Pride. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // Aeron's lips curved into a slow, foreboding smile. True enough. You are cunning, powerful, but at the end of the day, his voice dropped sharp as a blade. Still a fool. With a crackle that echoed through the chamber, Dricker manifested in his right hand a greatsword rod of black flame. Its blade pulsed, alive, as if it breathed beneath his grip. Tyrion's eyes widened, hidden behind a mask only loosely maintained. Jaime stumbled backward, his breath catching as the sword's ember light danced over his face. Even the torchlight dimmed, as though the darkness acknowledged a greater shadow now. Aeron's voice rang out again. Now, kneel, or die. And it won't end with this chamber. You'll be claimed by the shadows and I will see your house eradicated. A chill silence followed. Tywin's gaze shifted to the burning sword, then back to Aeron. His pride held firm, unmoved. I am the Lion of Castle Rock, he said quietly, voice straight as a spear. I kneel to no one. Jaime gasped, stepping forward. Father. Aeron's eyes flicked to Jaime, twin fires against shadow. With a crease of thought, Jaime stiffened, ready to shield his father. But Aeron's voice was calm and final. Don't. With a gesture, Jaime was frozen in place, gripped by ruler's authority, an invisible leash of power that bent his will. He could move his eyes, but his body would not obey. Aeron turned back to Tywin, stepping forward until the sword's black glow was inches from the old lion's throat. His words were ice on coal. You say you care for your house more than anything. But your pride has carried you here. And by your own hand, you have damned them all. Tywin stared at the blade, the man, the room. His last breath came slow, no apology, no fear, only the rigid dignity of a fallen lord. Then Aeron's Dricker fell. A single sweep. The blade came down in an instant, a quiet thump rather than a scream. Where Tywin Lannister once stood, only darkened robes and silence remained. His head on the floor. His throat already still. Jaime's hands clenched into fists, the tension on the spell snapping him free. He lurched forward, voice raw. No. Father. No. He knelt at the body, pressed a trembling hand upon Tywin's chest. Eyes wide, life gone but honor still there in memory. Aeron sheathed the black blade with a hiss. He turned, stepping over the body without another glance. You do well to do the right thing now in his stead, he said softly, not to Jaime, not even to the body. The words carried, final an echo of fire and shadow, decree and doom. Then, arise. The word did not echo, it commanded. It was not meant for the living. From Tywin Lannister's body, now black and bloated beneath the hearth's failing light, a figure began to pull free. A silhouette of a man in lordly garb took shape, its details growing clearer with every heartbeat. The strong jaw, the furrowed brow, the proud shoulders, it was him. It was Tywin. Only, wrong, now a shadow soldier, kneeling before Aeron Grim. Its eyes glowed faint violet, a mockery of life. The figure bowed its head low, obedient. Silent. Jaime recoiled, scrambling back onto the stone floor. You're a plague on this land, he said hoarsely, eyes locked on the thing that wore his father's shape. 7 hells, you're a bloody monster. Aeron didn't blink. No, his voice was soft. Too soft. But I can be. The Shadow Monarch bent, slowly, and took up Tywin Lannister's severed head by the hair. He held it up as though it were just a crownless relic, his violet gaze not once straying from Jaime's own. Castle Rock is next and there won't be no rains of Castamere sung for you, Aeron murmured, his tone colder than the wall. Only silence. Only dust. Forgotten from history. And then he vanished. No great burst of magic. No thunder. One heartbeat he was there, violet-eyed and terrible, holding the head of Westeros' most feared lion, and the next. A shadow cat stood in his place, black smoke curled from its back like steam rising. Its eyes impossibly bright locked on Jaime. The Kingslayer froze. The shadow cat growled low, a sound born of another world. Then it lunged. Jaime flinched, throwing his hand up, lips parting for a final cry, but no sound came. His heart pounded like war drums in his ears, but no claws struck, no fangs tore into him. He opened his eyes. The shadow was gone. Only his father's cooling body remained. And the sound of the fire, cracking quietly in the dark, as if nothing had happened at all. Jaime sat there, alone now, truly alone, for the first time in his life. And for the first time in years, maybe in his lifetime, he trembled in true fear. Red Keep. Throne Room. The fading light of day filtered through the tall stained glass windows of the throne room. Tommen Baratheon sat quietly upon the iron throne, dwarfed by its twisted metal and jagged swords. Cersei stood beside him, arms crossed, lips tight with disapproval as Kevan Lannister addressed the small court gathered beneath the dais. Our grain stores from the Crownlands are strained, Your Grace, Kevan was saying. Too many mouths. With Hayford and Stokeworth burned, because of, you know. The doors groaned. They all turned. The golden lions embroidered on the crimson banners seemed to shudder as the great doors of the throne room creaked open. A single man entered, slow steps, uneven, like the world itself had grown too heavy. Jaime Lannister. The Kingslayer. He stood in full armor, dusty and blood-spattered, the lion of House Lannister dulled beneath a coat of road-worn grime. In his arms, limp, lifeless, headless, unmistakable, was Tywin Lannister. Dead. Gasps echoed off the cold stone walls. The court was struck silent. The only sound was the clink of Jaime's armor as he crossed the floor. Cersei's eyes widened. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. No, she whispered finally, voice trembling like a cracked glass. No. Her legs gave out. Sir Meryn Trant rushed to steady her, but she shrugged him off, stumbling down the steps. Tywin, Kevan stammered, blinking hard. That can't be, gods, that can't be. Jaime said nothing at first. He simply laid his father's body at the base of the Iron Throne, gently, reverently, as if Tywin could still feel the insult of cold stone beneath him. Blood stained the polished floor. Cersei collapsed beside the body, cradling Tywin's corpse in her hands, her sobs uncontrolled now, shaking as she grieved. Tommen stared down from the throne in wide-eyed terror. The boy did not cry. He didn't move at all. Kevan stepped forward, face pale. Who did this? Tell me, Jaime, who? Jaime's voice was quiet, hoarse, empty. It was him. No name needed, no title spoken. They all knew who he meant. Kevan took a slow breath, hands balling into fists. Aeron Grim. Jaime nodded once. Cersei's face twisted from grief into rage. He dares. She spat. He dares to touch our father. He warned us, Jaime murmured. Told us to yield. Gave us time. You defend him. She barked, rising, hair wild, cheeks wet with tears. No, Jaime said bitterly, looking at Tywin's body. But I saw what you and father were blind to. That man was not jesting. I saw his brutality in battle. Kevin turned to the throne, to Tommen. We need to send you somewhere safe, Your Grace, he said firmly, eyes darting between mother and son. This cannot be the end of his killing attempts. Cersei wiped her tears, eyes burning. He wants war, he'll have it. I'll see King's Landing bathed in flame before I bend the knee. I will burn everything so he can rule a kingdom of ashes before he sits on the Iron Throne. Jaime approached her quietly. She didn't look at him. Cersei, he said softly, his voice low, rough. Don't be an idiot. Her eyes snapped to his, wide and burning. He reached for her hand, held it tight. If you stay here, he said, you'll suffer father's fate. You saw what that thing did. You saw what he did. Cersei pulled her hand away, but Jaime stepped closer. There's no fighting that. No plan. No wildfire. No gold. No throne worth it. She tried to look away, to hide the shaking in her shoulders, but he wouldn't let her. Come with me, he said. Let's leave this place. Let's take our. He hesitated. Cersei's lips parted, but no sound came. Jaime swallowed. Let's take your children. Tommen. Myrcella. Let's keep them safe. The crown means nothing if it leads them to death. Her face twisted, torn between pride and pain. Her teeth clenched as tears welled in her eyes. Go where? She whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. Where would we run? To whom? Jaime's reply was firm, quiet, but resolute. Essos. Anywhere but here. Pentos. Lee. Even Volantis. Gods be damned. I don't care. We leave behind the name, the lion, the throne. And we live. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL 5 comments 0 vote. Rise, my king. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // Dragonstone, the Painted Table Hall. Aeron stepped through the arched corridor of Dragonstone, the stormy sea pounding against the cliffside. Shadows curled at his heels, following him like loyal hounds. He moved with silence, his mind already deep in thoughts. The guards standing at attention bowed low the moment they caught sight of him. Your Grace, one of them said, voice taut with reverence. Your Grace, echoed the other. Aeron said nothing. His eyes, glowing violet, flicked toward the great doors ahead, the war room, the painted table beyond. Through the stone, he heard murmurs, voices in council. Dragonstone is already a great fortress, my queen. I suggest we remain here as our base of operation, Varys was saying. Indeed, we just received a raven from Raya. It's going rather smoothly, came Tyrion's voice, sharper, but laced with fatigue. This is rather an easy war to win. We shouldn't even bother send the queen's troops. Aeron can. Aeron pushed open the doors. The heavy wood groaned. They turned at once. Tyrion blinked and gave a low whistle. Well, speak of the devil. Varys inclined his head. Your Grace, he said smoothly, stepping back. But it was Daenerys who moved first, her gaze locking onto Aeron the moment he entered. Something in his face made her frown. She didn't speak, just stepped forward, dress whispering over the stone floor, and took his hands gently in her own. You're pale, she said softly. Are you well? Aeron exhaled through his nose, faintly amused. I'm fine, just tired. His voice had that same distant steel. Been all over Westeros these past few days. Her hands tightened around his. There's something else, isn't there? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked past her, to the painted table where the world was carved out in rock, all kingdoms divided by shallow trenches and wooden markers. His voice came low and measured. The reach is ours. They bent the knee without a drop of blood. We now hold nearly all of Westeros save the Westerlands, the Vale, and the Crownlands. He paused. That leaves the Lion's Den, and the throne they guard. Daenerys's lips curved faintly. That's good news. But she studied him closer, narrowing her eyes. Then what weighs on you so heavily? You wear your fatigue like a shroud. I must go north, he said, tone dropping lower. The true threat is still there. Watching. Waiting. He began pacing slowly, hands folded behind his back like a general in thought. The Wildlings and the Northmen are allies now. That works in our favor. The Night King, whatever remains of him, will find few corpses to raise this way. Varys looked visibly disturbed. Tyrion poured himself a goblet of wine and didn't drink. Daenerys watched Aeron pace, her jaw set. How strong is he? She asked. This Night King. I don't know, Aeron said, voice tightening. He shouldn't be much. But after what I've seen, the apostles, the ones the gods chose to destroy me, the one you saw, I'm not so certain anymore. He may be more. Something unpredictable. He turned, his eyes glowing faintly even in the firelit chamber. Still, even with what he might be, I've gathered all that I need. Every weapon, every tool. My shadows. I feel ready to face anything. Daenerys stepped forward again, firm now, her hand reaching to stop him mid-step. Then why do you bear this burden alone? Why keep sending everyone and me away so you can go to face death and ice? Her voice wavered not with weakness, but with a storm of emotion. Do you think me so fragile that I'd shatter like glass at the first sign of danger? Aeron stared at her. The fire between them flickered in the silence. No, he said, but I know I'm the only one who can stop these things. These beings. These monsters. And I don't want you to fall if the danger is unpredictable. He gave a half laugh. It was hollow, bitter, and short. Besides, I've grown used to doing things alone. Daenerys stepped closer, her breath catching. Then get unused to it. Without another word, she pulled him into a kiss soft but searing, the kind of kiss that quiets storms and stirs deeper ones. When they pulled apart, her violet eyes met his, unwavering. Never send me away like that again. The room was silent but for the sound of the hearth. Varys, ever composed, folded his hands. Well, he said dryly, that was. Tyrion finally sipped his wine and muttered, 7 hells, why am I blushing? Aeron gave them both a sidelong glance, one brow lifting faintly. But he said nothing. Instead, he gently cupped Daenerys's cheek with one gloved hand. I'll try, he murmured. The room itself felt far smaller now, intimate even, almost quiet. A fire burned in Daenerys's violet eyes as she studied Aeron, his form still haloed by the long shadows of battle and consequence. She smiled. Not the smile of a queen before her court, not the calculating smile she offered ambassadors and allies, a warmer one. Then she stepped back from him, eyes glinting with mischief and meaning. I have a gift for you, she said. At her cue, the doors creaked open. Missandei entered first, graceful as ever, her robes flowing like silk. Behind her strode Ser Jorah Mormont, his face weathered by sea and sun, his bearing stiff with purpose. Strapped to his waist was something wrapped in rich black cloth, and though he moved like a knight, he carried it like a priest might carry something sacred. Jorah came to a halt beside Daenerys and undid the cloth carefully, reverently. What lay beneath shimmered faintly in the firelight, a circlet of Valyrian steel, set with large, square-cut rubies. A crown, old and significant. Aeron tilted his head, intrigued, his eyes drawn to it instinctively like a wolf to the scent of old blood. I sent Jorah to Dorne, Daenerys explained, tone measured but proud. They remember what the Lannisters did to Elia Martell. They remember the screams of children and the silence that followed. Hatred like that doesn't wither easily. Tyrion, lounging with a goblet of wine in hand, gave a dry snort. How unsurprising. The Dornish always did have a long memory, and a taste for poetic vengeance. Daenerys nodded. They said they would bend the knee to a Targaryen, or even a devil wearing a crown if it meant the lion who ruled behind the throne would face justice. Her voice softened. They gave us this. Jorah stepped forward and, without flourish, placed the uncovered crown in her hands. Daenerys turned to Aeron, her gaze never leaving his as she extended it forward. You know what this is, don't you? Aeron's eyes widened as he stepped closer, his voice low with recognition. That's Aegon's crown. The Conqueror's. Daenerys arched a brow, the corner of her lips curling upward. Impressive knowledge. Most would mistake it for a piece of old iron. Her tone grew softer, reverent. It was lost, vanished during the time of Daeron the young dragon. But Dorne kept it. In secret. Preserved. She pulled it back gently from his reach, cradling it in her palms as though it might burn. Then she smiled again, wider now, something playful lighting her features. Kneel. Aeron's violet gaze met hers. And for a moment it caught him off guard, but he knew what she was about to do. He smiled. As you command, my queen. And he lowered himself to one knee before her. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Daenerys stepped forward, the crown held above him. Her voice rang clear, not loud, but full of grace. There is no man more worthy to wear the Conqueror's crown than you, she said. You crossed lands. You fought men and gods. You faced dragons and demons alike, and never once did you run. You did not ask for power, but it followed you, and I am a witness to that. You do not crave the throne, yet you care about the realm and its people even if you do not show that, you have earned it. With both hands, she placed the crown upon his head. It fit as though it had waited for him. Behind her, Tyrion set his goblet down, solemn for once, his brows slightly lifted in awe. Varys watched in contemplative silence, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Missandei's smile was quiet but full of pride, and Jorah stood straighter, still not sure if this was the right thing to do. Daenerys placed her fingers under Aeron's chin, lifting his gaze to hers. Rise, my king, she whispered. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. 3 comments 0 vote. A Better Realm. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // The Conqueror's crown still rested on Aeron's head, its iron glinting in the firelight like a thing reborn out of a myth. Silence lingered in the chamber. But Aeron did not rise with arrogance or pride. He stood slowly, carefully, as if the gravity of what had just passed was not lost on him. His violet eyes lifted to Daenerys. I don't take this lightly, he said, his voice low and solemn, but steady. A crown, power, it corrupts most men. Burns others alive from within. But I'm not most men. He took her hands gently, eyes locking with hers. You trusted me when you didn't need to. You believed in me when I gave you little reason to, or maybe through fear initially. Aeron laughed. But I will do everything in my power to be worthy of that trust. Aeron added. His tone shifted, softening for a heartbeat. Even if the world crumbles, even if everyone turns against me, I will not falter. I promise you, I will try to earn this crown. Every day. She smiled faintly at that something warm and unreadable flashing in her eyes. But Aeron had already begun to turn. His cloak stirred behind him like restless smoke, the shadows at his boots curling as if they longed to move. Now, about Dorne's request. He spoke it almost as an afterthought, pacing slowly along the edge of the painted table, his fingers brushing the carved ridges of Westeros. When he came to the region marked Dorne, he halted. I have already fulfilled it. The words dropped into the chamber like stones in deep water. Tyrion's brow furrowed. What do you mean, fulfilled it? They seek to have justice from my father. Either by trial or. Daenerys blinked, her voice quieter, a touch more cautious. You did. Aeron didn't answer, not with words. Instead, he stood still as a statue, his eyes flickering with violet light. The shadows beneath him darkened unnaturally. Then from that inky void, a figure rose. A shadow knight fully armored, its helm shaped like some nightmare's grin. It stood silent for a moment, then turned and reached into the void it had come from. It pulled forth a severed head. The knight walked forward and, without ceremony, dropped it with a dull thud on the stone floor. The air in the room froze. Missandei gasped sharply, a hand flying to her mouth. Jorah Mormont took a reflexive step forward, his eyes drifting toward the head, trying to figure out his features, and he did. Varys said nothing, his eyes wide, mouth barely parted. But the way he shifted, almost imperceptibly, said more than any words could. And Tyrion. Tyrion stared. The face was unmistakable. Tywin Lannister. Still and pale, features fixed in that same cold, judging scowl even in death. A lion silenced. The architect of the realm's most ruthless age, now reduced to a grisly token at the feet of vengeance. Tyrion blinked, as if trying to wake from a dream. Then his mouth twitched into a grim line. I suppose, he said softly, it would have led to this one way or another. Daenerys took a half step closer to Aeron, her voice laced with a quiet sort of awe. You killed the Lannister already? Aeron turned to face them all, his cloak sweeping behind him. His eyes burned as they fixed on the severed head. The old lady Tyrell was right, he said. He would never kneel, would never serve anyone, not even a better realm. I gave him time to choose his house over his pride. He refused. He looked up, gaze sweeping across them all. So I chose for him. And I didn't just end the man. I ended what he stood for. A beat passed. The lions roared for too long, arrogantly. Tyrion took a long breath and nodded once, just once. Not approval, not celebration, just understanding. I just hope, he murmured, that this will be for a better realm. The torches guttered low as if bowing before the shift of power that had just occurred. Tyrion's eyes remained on the stone floor. Aeron, his gaze steady, turned toward the painted table toward Westeros carved in wood and steeped in history. The moment I returned here, Aeron said, calm as if speaking of the weather, I already sent the cannibal. The room stilled. Daenerys's eyes widened slightly. The cannibal. Her voice trailed, and she tilted her head slightly as if listening. Then her brows creased. He stopped roaring. I hadn't noticed until now. Where to? She asked. Aeron's violet eyes pulsed with a dim inner light as he replied, Castle Rock. There was no flair, no dramatic weight in his voice. Just a cold certainty, like a sentence passed. Tyrion flinched. He opened his mouth then closed it. His jaw tightened, and he looked away. He could argue. He could plead. But the truth had settled in his chest like ash in wine. They had already been granted time more than his house deserved. And Tywin had spent that time sharpening his pride rather than seeking peace. His silence said everything. Aeron stepped forward. On the cannibal's back are my shadow soldiers, he continued. They will ensure no innocents are harmed once he arrives. Only soldiers. Only the rock itself. Their ancestral seat will fall, and with it, their entire influence over this realm. He paused, then added, voice sharp, no sons. No daughters. No women. No children of war. Just those carry swords. He turned to the painted table, placing a hand upon it. His fingers grazed the model of the capital, his gaze narrowing. As for the Crownlands, Raya and Grey Worm ride with the Tyrell host. They should be nearing the gates of King's Landing by now. He looked up slowly, addressing the room. They will not strike immediately. They will offer surrender. A full day. If the city yields, we enter peacefully. If they resist, the shadow assassins I left within Raya's shadow will silence the city from the inside. No burning. No chaos. No screaming. Just silence. And then the armies will take the gates. Missandei looked troubled. Jorah's brow furrowed. Varys's voice, however, cut the air next. It does seem like a good plan, Your Grace, the spider said carefully, though I fear the realm doesn't see you in a good light. Especially after what happened in the Crownlands, you should know that. His gaze flicked once to Tywin's head. Aeron didn't blink. I know what he did, he said flatly. Tywin worked quickly. Poisoned tongues. False witnesses. Random attacks on peasants and villages, whispers seated among frightened lords and common folk alike. He sought to turn fear into a wall against me. He smiled. Just slightly. It wasn't a pleasant smile. But I have eyes. And shadows. Soldiers scattered across the realm. I hear more than ravens bring. He clearly underestimated me. He turned, his violet eyes glinting beneath the firelight, his gaze falling on Varys. And the people of King's Landing. They change their minds faster than the wind changes direction. They cursed Robert as a usurper. Then praised him as savior. They cheered Joffrey. Then spat on his corpse. They want food, peace, a name they can sing. It's really not a challenge to change how they see things. Varys looked as if he wanted to argue. But in the end, he simply inclined his head. You're not wrong. Silence followed until Aeron stepped back from the table, hands clasped behind his back. But, he said at last, I have another plan. They all turned to him. Something I didn't want to use. Daenerys narrowed her eyes. What is it? Aeron's face was unreadable, his voice slow. A way to fool the people. It's an ability I have right now, something a person like Cersei would use. If she ever gets her hands on. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL 5 comments 0 vote. Masked. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // Aeron's face remained still. Calm. Too calm. A way to fool the people. Varys's eyes flicked up with sudden sharpness. Aeron held up a hand. Don't panic now, and simply watch this. Then, in one smooth motion, he reached into the dark void of his system inventory. A shimmer appeared in the air, subtle to the eye, more felt than seen. From the void emerged a strange, uncanny object, a mask. Not just any mask, this one shifted. Its surface was alive, writhing and flowing like water and shadow. Dozens of expressions surfaced across it: rage, grief, serenity, mockery blurring in and out of focus. The mask of the forgotten faces. The room was silent as a crypt. What in the 7 hells is that? Jorah asked, his voice wary. Daenerys stared, a mixture of intrigue and unease in her gaze. It's disturbing. Varys, for once, looked shaken. I've seen many things in this world, Your Grace, but that is quite the artifact. Aeron turned the mask in his hands, examining it like one might regard a viper. Then, without hesitation, he lifted it and pressed it against his face. At first, it clung to him like oil. Then it merged. His skin bubbled and warped, his features contorting in ways the eye struggled to comprehend. His lips twitched. His cheeks sank. His bones shifted with a crunching sound just under the skin. And when it was done, when the storm of shadows had stilled, Tywin Lannister stood before them. Every detail was perfect. The hair now graying at the temples. The steely gaze. The expression of calculated disdain. Even his posture rigid, commanding. And when he spoke, it was with Tywin's voice. If we are to win the realm fast without bloodshed, said Aeron as Tywin, then let us do so as lions in wolves' clothing, just like they do. Jorah took a step back, hand half on his sword, his mouth agape. Gods. Varys's eyes widened, his voice hushed. It's really like Lord Tywin himself. Daenerys said nothing at first, but her lips parted slightly, astonished. That is beyond even magic. Varys then slowly stepped forward, studying the transformation with a calculating eye. I believe I know of such things. There is a place in Bravos, where men train to be no one. Killers, assassins. They can even take the face of anyone they slay. Aeron turned slightly toward him, Tywin's voice echoing through the hall. The faceless men, he said. Servants of the many-faced god. How did you obtain this? Daenerys began. I gained this, Aeron said, finally removing the mask, his form melting back into his true self like smoke in reverse, when I slew an apostle of that god. His violet eyes flicked to Tyrion. Tyrion had said nothing during the entire display. No remark, no clever quip. He stared at the ground, then raised his eyes to Aeron with a quiet tension. I'd like to excuse myself, Tyrion said, voice low. Aeron tilted his head. Leaving this island, or this room? Tyrion looked up. This room. Aeron nodded once. You may leave. Tyrion left with slow steps, his back straight, though his hands trembled faintly at his sides. Daenerys watched him go, her expression unreadable. After the door shut behind him, she turned to Aeron. It seems, it's a bit too much for him. Yeah, Aeron murmured, his voice now softened. So it would seem. He turned back to the painted table, the faint smirk gone, replaced with grim purpose. I'll return to King's Landing at once. As Tywin, I'll call for the city's surrender. It will save us time and blood. And if they hear and see Tywin himself calling for the surrender, they will lay down their arms for good. Varys was quiet for a beat, then stepped forward. A question, Your Grace. Aeron gave him a nod. Did anyone witness Tywin's death or his body? Aeron's voice was like steel dipped in ink. His children did. Jaime and Cersei. And the court members in the throne room. The rest servants, soldiers. They'll speak of what they saw, but they'll not carry the tale outside the Red Keep. They won't make it public. The Lannisters themselves will make sure of this. Varys considered that. Then perhaps it won't matter. The Lannisters may keep it secret out of shame or strategy. And the common folk will not know unless the Lannisters tell them, which they won't. Not unless they're fools. Or desperate, Daenerys added. Aeron's eyes glowed faintly once more. Either way, it costs us nothing to try. And everything to gain. Aeron stood over it one final time, his gaze sweeping across the carved rivers and mountains of Westeros like a warlord contemplating the final stroke of a pen. He drew a quiet breath, then turned. I'll go now, he said, voice quiet but resolute. Daenerys stepped forward, her eyes softening just enough for the warmth behind them to show. Be safe, she said. And best of luck, Aeron. He turned slightly, flashing her that faint, almost boyish grin that rarely surfaced beneath his usual calm. Of course, he said with a small laugh, the sound light, but there was an undertone. He paused mid-step, then glanced over his shoulder. Oh, and one more thing, he added, tone suddenly sharp again, eyes glowing just faintly under the torchlight. I know you sent a fleet toward King's Landing. Have them change course, and send them north instead. The room quieted, even the flames seemed to hush. Daenerys blinked, surprised, then gave a slow, half-resigned nod. Very well, no questions and no hesitation. She had learned by now, if Aeron knew something, he just knew. Aeron didn't linger for farewells. His form darkened, outlines dissolving like smoke caught in wind. In a single breath, he vanished, swallowed by his own shadow. Another figure stirred one of his silent soldiers, a being forged of darkness and armor, stepping forward like a sentinel left behind in place of its master. The soldier remained, watching, guarding, wordless. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the distant rush of waves below Dragonstone and the low crackle of fire. Varys broke the silence with a dry smirk and a hushed tone. It seems nothing goes past him, my queen. Daenerys stood where she was, still looking toward the spot where Aeron had vanished. Her expression was calm, and she said with a genuine smile. Indeed. The Red Keep, King's Landing. Aeron Grim stood alone within its ancient halls, his violet eyes flickering beneath the torches as if reflecting something deeper, something darker. In his hand, he held it, the mask of the forgotten faces. Its surface ever writhing with the echoes of 100 expressions. Aeron exhaled and muttered to himself, this is about to be weird, isn't it? He raised the mask to his face. As soon as it touched his skin, the transformation began. Muscles reformed, bone shifted, flesh knitted into another mold. The process was smooth, if unnatural, too clean to be magic, too profane to be anything else. One moment, the Shadow Monarch stood in his war-black leathers. The next, Tywin Lannister was alive again. The grim, calculated scowl of a man who had ruled behind thrones more effectively than kings ever had. Even the way he stood had changed. Aeron adjusted his posture instinctively, tilting his shoulders with the quiet menace Tywin had always worn like a cloak. The old lion had returned, or so it would seem. He summoned half a dozen of his soldiers. Silent knights of death, their black armor glinting like obsidian in the torchlight, their eyes glowing dim violet beneath helms. Scatter, he commanded them under his breath. Just be subtle. They vanished like whispers swallowed by the stone. Aeron, now Tywin, strode forward, boots echoing through the corridor with the steady thrum of authority. The few guards that passed him on patrol didn't so much as blink. The sight of Tywin Lannister was familiar enough, and fear had long taught them not to question what they did not understand. But as he neared the royal chambers, things changed. Two Kingsguard stood at the polished bronze doors, dressed in resplendent white cloaks, their hands resting on the hilts of their blades. Their faces paled as if they had seen a ghost. My lord hand. One of them stammered. Aeron only offered a cold glance, just sharp enough to pierce the man's soul. The guards stepped aside. One muttered a soft, almost instinctive, "Forgive me, my lord." Aeron pushed the doors open. The royal chambers were cast in half-light, golden from the flickering candelabras. Plush carpets, lavish silks, and untouched goblets of wine. But no Tommen, no Cersei. The room was empty. He took a cautious step inside, eyes scanning every corner. Then, system notification. An apostle is nearby. A sudden chill rolled through his spine, not from fear but instinct. Aeron stood still, like a wolf scenting the wind. He raised his voice slightly, no longer in Tywin's tone, but his own. Bad timing for the bastards to appear. He murmured, his violet gaze narrowing. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. 3 comments 0 vote.